Ebelstein was a city of cramped rooftops and winding alleys, and deep in its slums lived a shabby old man everyone called the Boastful Old Man. He was only capable of using one-star magic. Yet he strutted through the streets as if he stood above all others, lifting a hand to flash crude blue light while loudly declaring that he was an archmage. His temper was notoriously bad. Children barely needed to play a harmless prank before he would erupt in fury, shouting and raging the moment his patience snapped. Even so, Derek learned magic from that old man. There was no grand destiny behind it. The old man wanted a follower to listen to him, and Derek wanted knowledge. Night after night, beneath dark trees and beside a small fire, the old man would sit across from him, raising a finger as he lectured and hammered lessons into his head. The flames crackled between them as time passed quietly, seasons changing one by one. Bare branches and cold winds eventually gave way to fresh green leaves and warmer days, and watching slowly turned into practice. In a clearing, Derek knelt and focused on steadying his breath. He pressed his hands against the ground as a faint blue aura gathered around his body. Sweat slid down his face as the flow inside him finally began to move the way the old man had described. The old man stared in disbelief, his eyes widening, and he says that Derek has grasped the flow of mana before trailing off, as if what he was seeing made no sense to him. The pressure grew heavier. Derek's vision sharpened, his red eyes reflecting the swirling blue surge as mana screamed at the edge of control. He forced it into shape, pushing it outward. Energy burst from his hands in a violent arc, becoming a blazing blue strike that ripped through the air. The light slammed into a nearby surface with a sharp impact, scattering sparks and dust as it carved in with overwhelming force. Behind him, the old man froze, utterly stunned by what he had just witnessed. And so, while doing endless chores for the old man and enduring his constant demands, Derek continued training. In just 1 year, he became a one-star mage. At night, the old man would drink and speak as though the world had already decided everyone's limits. He says that beyond the northern walls of Ebelstein, noble children reach 3-star levels before their coming-of-age ceremonies. He says that someone lowborn like Derek, with common blood, could train for an entire lifetime and still never reach that height. He warns him not to grow arrogant and insists that Derek's pitiful talent would hit a wall at 2-star, forcing him to give up. The old man never tired of preaching about bloodlines. He says that magic is determined by blood, and he insists that effort means nothing in the face of it. Derek listened quietly, chewing on plain bread as the same argument circled again and again, drawing an invisible wall between nobles and commoners. At times, Derek wondered if the old man spoke that way because he himself carried regrets for things he could never achieve. That night felt especially long. The old man fell asleep near the dying fire, and Derek remained awake behind him, staring into the darkness as the embers slowly faded. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, drumming over everything until the world turned cold and gray. When he returned the next day, the old man was dead. The body lay sprawled in the rain, covered in bruises from a brutal beating. Derek stood over him as water soaked his hair and sleeves, assuming at first that the old man had picked a fight and been beaten somewhere. Later, he learned the truth. Guards had beaten him after catching him trying to steal a 2-star magic book from a warehouse. Derek kept wondering why an old man who constantly spoke of limits and bloodlines would do such a thing. No one had an answer. The boastful old man had always drilled the idea of bloodlines into Derek until it felt carved into his bones. Yet Derek could never be of noble blood. That was because he was not even someone from this world. A blue window appeared and states that Derek has mastered the basics of magic and must choose a primary magic school, warning that the decision cannot be changed. And so, 4 years passed. Katya Flameheart entered Derek's life. She was the former mistress of the fallen Viscount Flameheart family, a noble by birth and a 3-star mage. Many mercenary groups sought her out. While staying in Ebelstein, she accepted work with the Beldern Mercenary Company and taught Derek, who had joined as a young member using only 1-star magic. From Katya, Derek learned many things a 3-star mage could teach. At Beldern's Tears Tavern, she says that it is natural for mages to harbor ambitions of rising higher, and she points out that Derek has that sort of talent. She then warns him that excessive greed only slows progress. Derek replies that he will keep her words in mind. Katya tells him to close his eyes and feel mana. She says that he should calmly sense where mana comes from, understand its flow, and then imagine what he wants to manifest through it. Derek sits still as a thin blue aura forms around him, sweat gathering on his face as he concentrates. Watching him closely, Katya says that he clearly possesses a considerable amount of innate mana. She adds that perhaps due to his combat experience, his mana control is also unusually stable. The energy suddenly surges harder, flooding Derek's senses until his eyes snap open under the pressure. Katya's expression tightens as she reacts to the abrupt shift. A violent sound crashes through the tavern, rattling the room. Mercenaries jump to their feet, shouting and demanding to know what just happened. Someone yells that it might be an attack and orders others to check outside. Derek stares at his hands as faint vapor curls around them, then he looks up sharply and calls out for his master. Katya grips Derek's wrist and orders him to stay silent and simply follow her. Outside the tavern, armed people in the street tense up, and one of them mutters that they definitely heard an explosion, then warns everyone to look carefully because it was unmistakably an explosion. Katya leads Derek through the narrow alleyway toward the orange glow ahead, and Derek calls for his master, uneasy. Katja turns back with a hard look and tells Derek to listen carefully to what she is about to say. Derek answers that he understands. Katja explains that nobles are extremely sensitive about their privileges, and she says that magic is the greatest privilege of all. She adds that innate power is treated like a blessing, but only when it belongs to nobles. She says that it is very rare for commoners to reach the 3-star level, and when it happens, it is usually because they devoted their entire lives to magic. Katja then points out what Derek just used and states that it is a 2-star illusion spell called auditory hallucination. Derek stays still, sweat beading as he absorbs her words. A notice flashes and Derek's vision access to 2-star magic is unlocked. 2-star magic auditory hallucination is acquired. Derek recalls that because of that moment, at age 14 he became a 2-star mage. Afterward, Katja keeps taking him along and teaches him various spells, and sometimes she also tells him stories about the high society she once moved through in her noble days. Time passes like that for a year, until Katja finally has to leave. The Count Elvester family had appointed Katja as a private tutor. The family stood under Margrave Elvester, a figure even the Grand Duke of the capital could not treat lightly, making the offer impossible to refuse. Becoming a magic instructor for a noble house of that standing was a tremendous opportunity. Before she left, Katja gave Derek a 2-star magic book as a gift. A blue window appears and states that he has acquired a magic list. It records combat magic as mana arrow full power and manifestation fireball, conversion magic as light creation, illusion magic as sound barrier and auditory hallucination, summoning magic as guide fairy, and detection magic as direction sense. Derek sits alone, the book resting in his hands, his head lowered as he continues studying and engraving its contents into his body. Another year passed, and Derek taught himself 2 additional 2-star spells. At just 16, he tells himself that he has no intention of stopping at this point. Back at Beldurn's Tears Tavern, a broad-shouldered man leans over the counter toward him and says that they finally have a proper job after a long dry spell. Derek asks what kind of job it is. The man grins and says that the request comes from none other than the Grand Duke Duplin family. Then he demands to know if Derek understands what that means. Derek repeats the name in disbelief and asks why such a family would approach them. The man snaps that this detail is what truly matters, then shouts that it is Duplain, the sort of family that spends gold like water. He says that if they establish a connection through this job, it could open many doors with them in the future. Derek presses for more information and asks what the request actually involves. The man says that it is nothing special, only hunting down a few monsters near the outskirts of the Grand Duchy. Derek asks if that is really all there is to it. The man insists that it is, adding that noble lords do not lie about such matters. Derek frowns, rubs his chin and sighs that something feels off, questioning why a family as powerful as Duplain would rely on mercenaries to deal with monsters. Derek stands and says that he will not take the job, telling the man to find someone else. The man lunges after him and yells for him to wait. Derek repeats that he should call another person, reminding him that he avoids suspicious work. The man snaps back that if that is the case, he will do it himself, but then he shouts that they need a mage, complaining that mages are rare in mercenary companies these days. He points straight at Derek and says that Derek is the only one suitable, which is why he is being asked. Derek lowers his gaze and says that he does not understand why a mage is necessary just to hunt a few monsters, adding that he would rather not get involved without reason. The man barks again and thrusts out a single gold coin, shouting that it is 1 Adel gold coin, then quickly clarifies that it is not the full payment, but merely the down payment. The coin rests in Derek's palm as his expression hardens. Soon after, a group arrives, an older man wearing a monocle with a neatly groomed mustache, a well-dressed woman at his side, and a hooded woman whose face remains hidden in shadow. The broad man gestures toward them and tells Derek to greet them, saying that these are his clients. The mustached man studies Derek and says that this will not do. He scoffs that Derek is a child who has not even undergone a coming-of-age ceremony. He says that he had expectations after hearing Derek distinguished himself in the Dawn War, but clicks his tongue and complains that sending such a young boy on this request is unacceptable. The broad man waves his hands frantically and argues with urgency, insisting that Derek is the real deal and claiming that he is the most capable mage he knows. The mustached man turns away and says that they are leaving, declaring that this mission cannot be entrusted to a child. At the doorway, the butler pauses as the woman beside him leans closer and murmurs something quietly. His expression tightens as he glances back, while the hooded woman remains to the side, silently observing without revealing her face. The hooded woman turns toward Derek and asks if he is Derek, then says that they should speak. After that, they move to the Grand Duchy of Duplain. On the outskirts, a goblin leaps out with a shrill cry and Derek steps forward without hesitation. His blade flashes once, cutting cleanly through the charge as blood sprays and the creature's body snaps aside before collapsing. Another goblin attacks from behind, but Derek twists away and strikes again, dropping it before the blow lands. As more rush in, blue mana crackles around his body and lashes outward in sharp lines, binding the goblins in place. Electric light fills the air as their limbs stiffen and their movements stop one by one. Derek glances over his shoulder and says that it is finished, addressing the dispatch officer. The man folds his arms and says that he understands. The hooded woman's lips curve slightly as she says that Derek captured all of them very quickly. Back at Beldurn's Tears Tavern, A blonde woman erupts in anger and shouts that Derek has become a noble's dog, calling his name as she storms forward. She tries to climb onto a table, and the broad man panics, telling her to get down and warning that there are customers present. She snaps that even if they are shabby commoners, they should not debase themselves by serving nobles. She demands to know how much the job paid, accusing Derek of throwing away his pride to crawl between a noble's legs. He curtly says that crawling between legs was not part of the request. The blonde woman asked how much he got, joking if it was only a silver coin. The man shakes his head, then breaks into a grin and declares that it was 1 gold coin. Her face lights up as she screams in disbelief. She immediately begs to crawl between Noble's legs as well, and the broad man snaps at her to be quiet, shouting again that crawling is not part of the request. Later that night, the blonde woman lies sprawled across a table, asleep with her cheek resting in a pool of drool. The broad man asks how the job went. Derek says that it was nothing special, explaining that he simply caught a few goblins. The man comments that the first impression was poor, but says that the clients seem wealthy. Derek agrees, then adds that all 3 of them were lying. The man asks if he is serious. Derek explains that a noble family's dispatch officer should possess youth, stamina, and social ability, and says that he looked for those traits but found none. He adds that the woman claiming to be a scullery maid had hands far too clean for someone who does physical labor. He begins to mention the supposed apprentice inspector as well. The broad man cuts him off, calling his name and saying that mercenaries do not need to pry into their clients' affairs. He says that they should simply complete the job and collect the payment, nothing more. Derek answers that he understands. He thinks that Jaden is probably right, and that in the wild only survival matters. He tells himself that everything else is irrelevant. The next day, in the Grand Duchy of Duplain, Derek reports that the area has been cleared, and that goblins will not appear again for some time. The monocled man acknowledges this and says that it is good work. Jaden immediately turns to business and asks about the remaining payment. When the coins are presented, Jaden's eyes shine as he excitedly shows them off, shouting that it is 2 gold coins and marveling at the amount. Derek tells him to put them away and speak properly. The monocled man clears his throat and says that he highly values Derek's abilities, adding that he wishes to entrust him with another request. Jaden blurts out in confusion. The man explains that the Grand Duke's estate is offering 15 idle gold coins for this task. Jaden explodes in shock at the number, and the man asks Derek if he will accept. Derek answers that he will. A carriage sets out, and they arrive at Duplain Manor within the Grand Duchy. Jaden stares at the enormous residence and says that it is impressive. Before entering, the monocled man says that he should properly introduce himself. Jaden panics at the sudden formality and tries to wave it off, saying that they have already worked together and should be comfortable. The man states that his name is Delon and that he serves as the chief steward of the Grand Duke's estate, then apologizes for concealing his identity due to the nature of his duties. Jaden falters, overwhelmed by how distinguished their clients are. A woman steps forward and says that she is Katerina, the head maid of the Grand Duke's estate. Jaden hurriedly introduces himself afterward, saying that he is Jaden, leader of the Beldern Mercenary Company. Derek watches in silence, thinking that they were never a dispatch officer and a scullery maid, but the chief steward and the head maid. He tells himself that he expected as much, though their ranks are higher than he imagined. The hooded woman approaches, her dress brushing against the stone floor as she walks. Derek looks toward her and begins to piece everything together, thinking that if this is the case, then she must be. The hood is drawn back, her hair spilling free as she reveals herself. She says that she is Iselin Eleanor Duplain. She states that she wishes to appoint Derek as the magic tutor for her younger sister, Diella. Iselin Eleanor Duplain, the eldest daughter of the Duplain family, meets Derek's eyes as she makes her request. The Grand Duchy of Duplain's residence rose in pale stone and sharp spires, servants and guards moving in quiet order beneath the open sky. Inside, Rhaeg hurried into an office and calls for his father and for Valerian to look at something. The man behind the desk glares and asks what Rhaeg thinks he is doing, telling him to conduct himself with dignity. Rhaeg snaps back that the one who needs dignity is not him but Diella, saying that she has gone too far and is now even laying hands on the people he hired. A maid trembles nearby with tears in her eyes. Valerian cuts in and tells Rhaeg to lower his voice, saying that they are in the middle of a conversation. Rhaeg refuses to back down and says that more than 10 servants quit just last month, adding that she smashes objects whenever she feels like it. He demands to know how long his father will keep turning a blind eye. Valerian's patience breaks. He calls Rhaeg's name sharply. Rhaeg speaks calmly and says that even if Diella is a good-for-nothing, they still have Iselin. Then he says that it is time to let Diella go. His father immediately shuts it down and says that it is not for Rhaeg to decide. Rhaeg presses on anyway, saying that he had the steward look into a monastery. He says that the facilities are good and that children of nobles go there as well. He argues that instead of living while being treated like a burden, it would be better for Diella to devote herself to God's will, and he adds that if keeping her here will bring great trouble to the family, then it would be better too. His father moves in an instant and seizes him, forcing him down with crushing pressure. He says that he believes he already told him that it is not Rhaeg's decision to make, and he repeats Rhaeg's name like a final warning. Reg lies rigid under his grip, then he says that when the time comes to decide, his father must be the one to decide. Later, Derek walks the halls with Iselin. Iselin asks if he has ever heard about her younger sister, Diella. Derek says that he has seen Lady Diella in the Duplain family's registry. Iselin confirms it and says that Diella is probably not well known to the public. A door swings open with a heavy sound, from which Valerian and Reg come out. Iselin stammers Valerian's name. Valerian steps into view and greets Iselin, saying that it has been a while. Then he asks how her experience in Ebelstein has been. Iselin answers that thanks to his care, she has been living comfortably. Valerian glances to the side, notices that Reg looks hurt, and says they should catch up later. Iselin says that she understands. Derek watches silently, his gaze sharpening as the pieces settle into place. Valerian stands beside Reg, pressing a cloth to Reg's head as if wiping away sweat or calming him down, and both of them stare forward with restrained faces. Derek watches from the side, his red eyes narrowing as he notices the tension in the room. A maid stands a short distance away, hunched and shaking, covering her face with her hands as she cries. In the Grand Duke's office, he sits with composed posture and says that he is relieved to hear she has been doing well in Ibelstein. She says that it is all thanks to her father. With a gentle smile, she introduces Derek as the magic tutor she brought from Ibelstein, explaining that he said he would take charge of Diella. The Grand Duke studies Derek and says that he understands. Iselin rises and says that since her father seems busy, they will take their leave. She turns to go, and Derek follows half a step behind her, but the Grand Duke calls out and orders Derek to stay behind. Derek pauses at the threshold, glances back with a guarded expression and falls silent. The Grand Duke continues working at his desk, pen moving across paper. Then he looks up and comments that Derek is quite young, confirming that he is 16. Derek answers that yes. The Grand Duke asks if Derek can handle magic to some extent. Derek replies that he can use a bit of one-star magic. The Grand Duke chuckles quietly and says that Derek has no reason to lie. He adds that humility does not always come off as a sign of virtue. Derek keeps his face still, but he thinks that the Grand Duke's name carries weight, and he concludes that humility will not work on a 5-star mage. Derek says that he apologizes if he came off as disrespectful. The Grand Duke says that it is fine, and he says that he knows why Derek carries himself that way, warning that being too talented can end up eating away at a person. He then says that judging by Derek's age and attire, he does not look like someone suited to be a magic tutor. Derek answers that he is a mercenary. The Grand Duke says that since Iselin chose Derek, he will not pry any further. He grants Derek entry to the annex of the residence where Diella lives, and he orders that a maid guide him, telling him that he may go now. Derek stops and asks to request one thing. The Grand Duke tells him to proceed. Derek says that he is a mercenary, and if he takes a commission, it is his duty to see it through. He states plainly that Lady Iselin commissioned him so that Lady Diella may learn magic and enter high society as a proper noble. The Grand Duke responds that Derek is merely spelling out the obvious. Derek says that he is doing it because he has an earnest request to make. The Grand Duke's expression shifts with quiet curiosity. Elsewhere in the residence, a plate is thrown, crashes and shatters on the wall, fragments skittering through the room. A maid recoils with a scream and collapses into a trembling bow, saying that she is sorry and apologizing sincerely to Miss Diella. Diella stands over her with cold eyes and says that the maid is foolish for thinking an apology will change anything, given her status. She orders the maid to get out of her sight immediately, and she threatens that if the maid shows herself one more time, she will throw another plate at her lowly face. In the waiting room, a cup and saucer sit untouched on the table as Jaden blurts out why Derek of all people was chosen, insisting that magic tutors should have been lined up in front of Duplain, and that a commoner would have difficulty working as a noble's magic tutor. Iselin lowers her gaze and says that she thinks she tried almost every famous magic master on the entire continent, but in the end they all gave up. She says that is why she opted for someone who can use magic but is under desperate circumstances. She argues that although Derek has the background of a mercenary, he seems to know a bit about how nobles conduct themselves and their culture. Jaden replies that Derek's master was a fallen noble who used to be quite successful, and Derek must have learned all sorts of things from him. Iselin smiles and says that she also figured Derek was refined and kind despite being a mercenary, and that she thought he might be able to gently rein Diella in and lead her. Jaden laughs lightly and says that Lady Iselin needs to learn how to see through people better. Iselin blinks and asks what he means. Jaden explains that Derek is a mage who grew up on the streets and worked as a mercenary before he even came of age. Then he asks if Iselin truly thinks someone from the streets can survive from nothing with kindness. Iselin's expression tightens, but she stays silent. After that, Dellen and the maid escort Derek down the corridor. Derek walks ahead with a calm face and lowered gaze, stopping at a tall door. He raises a gloved hand, hesitates for a brief beat, then knocks. He listens, then reaches for the handle and opens the door. Derek steps inside and greets the person within, introducing himself as Derek and asking to be excused for a moment. A girl sits in a chair near the bright window and tells him to come closer. She turns enough for her hair to catch the light, and she is revealed as Diella Catherine Duplain, the second daughter of House Duplain. Derek takes a step toward her, cloak trailing behind him. Diela's lips curl as she watches him approach. In the next instant, a splash erupts, cold water arcs through the air and slams into Derek's face and chest, soaking his hair and cloak. He stiffens under the impact, droplets running down his jaw as he exhales without a word. Diela clasps a hand to her mouth and says that this is horrible, pretending surprise as she claims she thought some sewer rat had come in. She asks if Derek is the mercenary the Grand Steward mentioned. Then she tilts her head and says that looking at him again, maybe he really is a sewer rat. She plants a foot onto a chair and climbs up, looming above him in her red dress. She spills another bucket on him and says that she prepared it for him, asking if it brings back memories of his hometown. She says that being drenched in gutter water suits him much better. Water continues dripping from Derek's hair and lashes as he stands motionless, eyes lowered, saying nothing. Diela glances at the emptied container and complains that she ran out of water, calling it a shame and saying this is disappointing. Derek finally raises his eyes slightly, and Diela's expression shifts as she lets out a small. Diela's expression twists as Derek's eyes lift toward her. She kicks him down and she snaps that he has no right to look at her. Diela stands over him in her red dress with her chin raised. She takes off her shoe as she mutters in disgust and says that he stinks, covering her nose as she looks at the water dripping from him. She throws her shoe at him before she plants herself in front of him and tells him to know his place, calling him a sewer rat. She mocks the idea of someone like him teaching her, and she says that the streets clearly did not teach him any common sense. Elsewhere, the Grand Duke's office sits heavy with books and documents, sunlight spilling across the desk. The Duke recalls the earlier meeting. Derek faces the Grand Duke and says that the fact he is here means Lady Diela's problem cannot be resolved easily. He says that he wants to ask the one who loves Lady Diela more than anyone else how much authority he is willing to grant him when it comes to teaching Lady Diela. The Grand Duke listens in silence, his gaze sharpening as the request lands. Back in Diela's room, the air snaps with a sudden impact. Diela's head jerks, her cheek flushing as shock floods her eyes. She drops to the floor, stunned, one hand rising toward the place she was struck. Derek stands above her in cold shadow, his cloak hanging heavy and his red eyes unmoved. He looks down at her and tells her to get up. 3 years ago. A wagon rattles along a country road as Derek sits beside his teacher. He calls her teacher and asks what she would do if she had to teach a stubborn student who did not appreciate kindness. She thinks for a moment and says that she would try to understand them, embrace them, and take them in. Derek asks if that is not too idealistic. Then he asks what she would do with a student he cannot even do that with. She says that the essence of teaching is to lead a student in a better direction, and she says that if he cannot communicate through understanding and acceptance, he must find a different starting point. Derek asks what a different starting point is. His teacher answers that it is by carving fear into them. Back in the room, Diela's eyes widen as Derek moves. A sharp impact snaps through the air, and Diela's cheek flushes as she drops to the floor, stunned and clutching her face. Derek stands over her and says that she will treat others with consideration and respect. He warns her not to make him say things twice, and he orders her to get up. Diela pushes herself up with shaking anger and swings at him, her strike thirding into his cheek. She trembles and screams that how dare the likes of him, and she starts shouting that he dares lay a hand on, only to get bitch slapped again. Derek looks down at her and says that he will not make her say things twice either. He repeats that when she deals with others, she will do so with consideration and respect. Diela's lips twitch into a disbelieving smile as she lets out a small, confused sound. Then she whirls and screams for the Grand Steward, shouting that this lowborn dared to put his hands on a young lady. The Chief Steward rushes in with maids close behind. He calls out to ask if Lady Diela is alright, then he glares at Derek and demands to know what he thinks he is doing. He shouts that Derek dared to lay a hand on the young lady and warns that if the Grand Duke finds out. Derek calmly raises a sealed document and says that His Grace has granted him full authority over all of Miss Diela's education. He adds that His Grace has permitted him to employ whatever method he chooses. The Chief Steward stammers as he reads, and Diela stares up at the paper in shock. Night falls over Duplain residence. Ray grabs Valerian's arm in the corridor and pleads for him to calm down, but Valerian storms forward and shouts that so Derek is the mercenary. Derek sits waiting inside, silent, eyes lifted only slightly. Valerian lunges in rage and screams how Derek dares hit Diela, and Ray clings tighter and begs him to put that down and talk. Derek turns his head and says that it is something His Grace permitted. Ray forces Valerian back and says that Derek is a guest Iceland brought, warning that if Valerian acts like this, it will harm Iceland's position. Ray adds that their father allowed it too. Valerian's jaw tightens as he swallows his fury. Valerian points at Derek and orders him to come with him. He snaps at Ray not to interfere and tells him to go attend to his own matters. Ray walks with Derek and says that he heard what happened, and he says that Diela does need a beating before she comes to her senses. He tells Derek not to worry, saying that Valerian will not go too far. Derek glances back over his shoulder as he walks, his red eyes steady and unreadable. Ahead of him, Valerian continues down the corridor, and Ray watches them go from behind. Ray mutters that he does not know why Valerian is protecting that hopeless one. In a dim space lit by a narrow beam, Small Dolls sits rigidly on the floor. Valerian stops at a closed door and tells Derek to come in. Inside, he says that this is the room Yahello used when she stayed in the main house, and that it has been left like this ever since. Derek steps into the cold, quiet room and looks over the canvases and the scattered traces of paint. Valerian says that Yahello used to love drawing. He says that every time she asked him to look at her drawings, her face would turn red, and that she was so adorable. He adds that she never finished a drawing, and that most of the time she would leave a blank space and only draw the parts she liked. Valerian pauses, then says that he is sorry about earlier, admitting that he got emotional and apologizing for it. Derek answers that he does not need to worry about it. Derek looks at the unfinished paintings and asks why Valerian brought him to this room. Valerian says that he wanted to show Derek that Yahello was not a child who deserved to be despised or beaten, but that at some point she started obsessing excessively over bloodline. He says that in the end she was driven out of the main house and locked away in the annex. He cannot even guess what turned her into that. Valerian says that they have to stop her from being sent to the monastery. He says that if she learns even one star magic, he will be able to persuade their father somehow. He grips Derek's shoulders with desperation and begs him to please save Yahello. Derek freezes mid-breath and says that he should wait. He flips open a book and says that she did not completely give up on magic, judging by all the notes in the margins of these books. Derek points toward the stacks and asks if the books over there are all theory books from the School of Regulations. Valerian answers that yes, and says that is right, because nobles learn from the School of Regulations. Derek closes the book slowly, eyes narrowing in thought, then he says that he will give it a try. Night settles over the annex. Yahello lies asleep in bed, her hair spread across the pillow, breathing slow and careless. Derek stands over her with a bucket in hand and tips it without hesitation. Cold water crashes down and Yahello jolts awake with a scream, thrashing under the drenched sheets. Derek looks down at her and asks if she is seriously falling asleep right now. Yahello gasps, blinking through the shock, and chokes out what is happening, then demands to know if he is out of his mind. Derek grabs hold of her and says that she needs to come with him for a moment, because there is somewhere they need to go. Yahello fights against his grip and screams for him to let go, shouting that he has no right to touch her and demanding to know if he is crazy. Yahello screams that it hurts and orders Derek to let go, insisting that she is not going with him. In the hallway, Mage watches as she shouts at Derek to stop, calling him a lowborn and demanding to know what he thinks he is doing. Under the cold moonlight outside, Derek keeps moving without slowing, pulling Yahello along as her nightgown drags through the grass. She stumbles and he yanks her forward again until she is forced down hard, crying out as she hits the ground. Yahello glares up through tears and rage, demanding to know what he thinks doing this will change. She snaps that he should wake up from his dream, and asks who he thinks he is to dare teach her. Derek cuts in and asks if she does not even want to listen, saying that he has an interesting fact. Yahello freezes, confused, and hesitates. Derek says that honestly he has no intention of teaching her magic. He adds that he simply likes beating up stuck-up nobles. Yahello jolts and asks what he just said. Derek asks if she does not agree, saying there is no reason for someone from the bottom to like nobles. He says that this tutor nonsense is only an excuse to beat up arrogant, high and mighty nobles like her. His hand closes around the hilt at his waist, and the blade shifts as if he is ready to draw. He asks if she knows how beautiful the screams of those noble people are. Yahello's breath catches as she asks if he thinks he will be safe after doing something like this. Derek answers that of course he will be safe, because she is going to be shoved into a monastery soon anyway. He asks who would believe anything she says. He continues coldly, saying that if something really big happens, he can just apologize with his life, and he adds that a commoner's life is worth that much, is it not? He says that he could also just run away, and that they would forget about him soon enough. He says that he would be doing Duplin a favor by getting rid of its headache after all. Yahello's face drains as she tells herself that she is going to die. She bolts. She runs across the night grass, dress whipping behind her, and she tells herself that if she gets caught by him now, she will die. She tells herself that if she cuts across the grassland toward the residence, he will catch her right away. She decides she has to shake him off in the forest. She tells herself that if it is the forest, she knows it well, and she can run back to the residence from there. As she pushes harder, panic blazing in her eyes, she tells herself that then he will be the one who dies instead. A sudden heat flares behind her. Yahello jerks mid-stride at the burning glow, and her eyes widen as a swirling sphere of fire blooms in the darkness. She stares, realizing it is a fireball. Then she panics as she remembers that fireball is 2-star magic. She demands to know how that bastard can use 2-star magic. The blazing orb drops like a falling sun, roaring down into the ground near her. The explosion throws light and heat across the forest edge, and Yahello screams as the flames erupt beside her. The fireball detonates in a violent bloom, dirt and sparks blasting outward as Yahello is thrown back, arms flailing while heat washes over her. She twists on the ground, eyes wide and shaking, and she sees Derek in the smoke with a faint smile. He says that he guesses he missed. Yahello scrambles up and runs, feet pounding through wet grass as she grits her teeth and forces herself forward. She stumbles hard and drops to her hands, groaning as her knees hit the ground, and a sharp blue streak slams into the earth nearby with a cracking impact. Diella jerks her head up, breath ragged. Another blue shot bites into the ground close enough to spray dirt, and Derek's voice carries through the dark. He says that she is pretty quick, then he says that it is hard to believe that speed belongs to someone who has been shut inside the annex all day. Diella glances back with trembling fury, then bolts again into the forest path. As she runs, her thoughts spiral. She wonders how long she has to keep running, and whether she can even get away. She tells herself that at this rate, he will definitely catch her. Behind her, Derek drops to one knee and presses a glowing hand to the soil, mana rippling in a circle like water. He lifts his gaze toward the trees and thinks that this forest is the one he saw in the paintings. He thinks that it must be where she has been running around since she was little. He thinks that without even realizing it, she felt the mana in the vast wilds and transferred that feeling onto the canvas. And he concludes that this is definitely. Diella suddenly whirls back with a ragged scream, raising a heavy rock over her head and bringing it down with all her weight. Derek quickly draws his sword and slashes the rock with a quick slash. Diella freezes, eyes blown wide at the failed blow. Derek steps forward with his sword lowered at his side, and says that he will admit her spirit is admirable, adding that knowing it would be hard to shake his pursuit, she chose to strike back instead, and that could not have been an easy decision. Diella pants on hands and knees, shaking as she tries to lift herself. Derek looks down and says that she does not even have the strength left to run anymore. He raises the blade and points it toward her and asks if she has any last words. Diella lets out a strained, bitter laugh. She says that he must be joking if he thinks she is going to apologize, and she says that unlike lowborns, she does not grovel. She tells him to just kill her. Derek lowers his blade slightly and asks why she is so obsessed with bloodline. Diella's shoulders shake as she turns away, then she asks what she would have left, saying that if someone takes away her great bloodline, what does she have left? She curls into herself and chants that it is magic, repeating it like a desperate prayer. With tears running down her cheeks, she cries out and asks if he thinks she never tried. She bends forward, nails digging into the dirt, and says that no matter how hard she tries, it still does not work. She says that if she gets weeded out of everything, magic or painting, then if she falls behind in everything, she will lose everything. She whispers again that if even bloodline is gone, then what is she, and she breaks down with the question hanging. Derek watches in silence. Mana flares along his sword. He lifts it high, blue light crawling over the steel, and he says that he has heard enough. He says goodbye. The blade swings and a sharp blue arc tears through the air. In the next instant, jagged ice erupts from the ground around Diella, blooming upward into a crystalline cage. Diella freezes, eyes widening as cold light surrounds her, and she stares at her own hands as if they no longer belong to her. She trembles and mutters that it is magic. Derek lowers his sword and places a hand over his chest, then he says that it is good work, Lady Diella, and asks her to pardon his rudeness. He says that it may not be something she could truly call magic if it is just a manifestation of mana, but he says that she still did it. Diella's breath catches in her throat, and a strangled sound escapes her. The cold bites deeper, panic floods her face, and she screams until her voice cracks inside the glittering ice. Later, under the moon, Derek sits with her in the forest and says that it means she is from the School of the Wild. Diella repeats it in disbelief and asks what the School of the Wild is. Derek says that it is right, and he says that he has heard most nobles learn the School of Regulations. He explains that at its core every school of magic is essentially the same, but it differs enormously in the process of understanding and mastering it. Diella gathers herself as he says that she is from the School of the Wild, and that trying to learn magic through the theory of the School of Regulations was bound to cause problems. She was not just trying to wear clothes that do not fit, but that it is like forcing herself into clothes that will not even go on her body. She looks straight at him and asks how he knew, asking how he knew she is from the School of the Wild. Derek says that he saw the drawing she made. He says that she could feel mana drifting through nature and put it onto the canvas. Derek says that mages born with the temperament of the School of the Wild usually sense the mana in nature when they are young. Diella listens with a stiff face, eyes still wet but focused on him. Derek looks her over and says that is enough, and that she should be able to walk now. Diella steadies her feet and silently tests her balance, thinking that this is not bad with just this much. Derek turns away and says that she succeeded in manifesting mana, but she still has a long way to go. He says that starting tomorrow, he will teach her how to manifest mana naturally. Diella calls Derek's name, hesitates, then awkwardly says thanks. Derek gives no immediate reply, then says they should go. Diella blurts that she's going with him too, hurrying after his back. As they walk under the moon, he brings up the sunset painting and asks if it was her work. Diella says that she does not know, and that it has been a long time since she put down a brush. He says that it was beautifully done. Diella's expression softens as she says that it was her masterpiece, and she adds that he is the first person who realized it was finished. Morning light pours into the room. Diella bolts upright in bed, then raises her hand and tries to gather mana again. A faint swirl forms at her fingertips, and she mutters that this is hard. Outside, a maid approaches with a bucket. As the door opens, startling the maid into a scream as the bucket jolts and the water sloshes onto Diella's pajamas. The maid panics and stammers an apology, saying she is sorry. Diella stands there, glaring. The maid gets down on all fours and starts begging for forgiveness. Diella tells the maid to watch where she is going. The maid freezes, confused by the lack of punishment, and crawls back in shock. Other maids gather and ask if she is okay and whether she was hit. The maid says that she is fine and that Lady Diella only told her to be careful. Someone murmurs, unable to understand what happened after Lady Diella went out last night, while Diella walks away down the hall without looking back. Derek sleeps, face half buried in his pillow, until loud knocking and a sharp voice call his name again and again. He groans and sits up, rubbing his eye, and asks what it is. Dylan stands with Diella and warns her to mind her manners, saying this is inappropriate. Diella demands that Derek teach her how to handle the mana she manifested. She says that she tried on her own but it is not working. Dylan's face contorts in shock as he realizes and repeats to himself that she manifested mana. Diella insists that Derek said he would teach her today, so he should hurry up and teach her. Dylan tells her to come back in the afternoon and leads her away. As they leave, Dylan mutters with teary relief that Lady Diella finally did it. She clicks her tongue. Diella whips around in irritation and demands to know who he thinks he is, ordering her to come back later. She pounds on the door, shouting for it to be opened right now, and demanding to be taught immediately. Derek, still exhausted, lies back down as the banging continues outside. Morning light washed over Duplin residence, the long roofs and high walls gleaming under a clear sky. In a corridor, maids worked with brooms and buckets, whispering as footsteps passed by. One maid asks if the other heard the rumor, saying that people were saying Lady Diella did not break a single plate. The other maid agrees excitedly and says that she splashed water that morning and did not get hit for it. The first maid leans closer and adds that they were also saying Lady Diella manifested magic, and the other maid gasps and asks if that is serious. A sharp set of steps stops near them. Raig turns, his face tightening, and he asks what they just said. Not long after, the Grand Duke sits behind his desk, pen moving as papers pile neatly nearby. Raig and Valerian sit across from him, the air heavy with restraint. The Grand Duke repeats the report with a measured tone, asking if Diella manifested magic. Valerian answers that yes and says that he asked the head butler and the servants repeatedly. The Grand Duke calls it a relief. Raig does not relax. He says that they should not jump to conclusions just because she manifested magic. Valerian snaps at Raig by name, saying that his sister manifested magic and he should be praising her. The Grand Duke falls silent, eyes unreadable as he continues writing. Raig reminds them that they remember everything she has done up until now. He insists that a result as small as this should not be enough to brush aside sending her to the convent. The Dyke stays silent, thoughts unknown. Later, sunlight spills through Diella's window, dust motes drifting in the bright air. Diella sits on her bed in her red dress, knees pulled in and arms wrapped tight around them. Derek stands nearby with a flat expression and asks if she is sulking. Diella answers that she is not sulking, and says that she is angry. Derek says that even if she acts spiteful like that, it will not change anything. Diella repeats that she is not being spiteful, and insists again that she is angry. Derek says that even if she keeps pouting, there is nothing they can do, adding that there is an order to everything. Diella whips around, face red with fury, and shouts that she is not pouting and that she said she is angry. Derek stares at her in silence. Diella grinds her teeth, then forces the words out and says that fine, they can say she is pouting. Derek tilts his head slightly, confused by the sudden shift. He drags a chair and sits with a book in hand, warning that just because she manifested magic does not mean she can go around using it, or it will backfire. He says that he is saying it because he has been through it. He adds that rest is just as important as learning, and tells her that she has rested enough, so now she needs to study. Diella folds her arms and scoffs, saying that of course the stuffy magic teacher would say that, and she sarcastically announces that the stiff lecture has begun. The room darkens under Derek's gaze, his red eyes sharpening as pressure seems to fill the air. He asks if he should teach her in a way that is not stuffy. The memory of last night's fireball flashes in Diella's eyes, and she flinches hard. She hastily backs down, huffing that she will forget it. Derek lets the tension drop and raises his hand, calm again. He says that today they will practice magic manifestation. He explains that once she can freely use magic manifestation, she will be able to learn one-star magic before long. He says that the School of the Wild has no rigid system, so it is ideal for self-study, and that it pursues far more freedom than the School of Regulations. Then he adds honestly that she actually suits the School of the Wild quite well. Diella's scowl falters. She stares at him with a guarded frown and asks what he is talking about. Derek looks Diella in the eyes and says that it is exactly what it sounds like. He says that her free, spirited nature has good compatibility with the School of the Wild. He adds that on top of that, she was born with Duplin blood, so she is overflowing with talent. Diella's eyes widen and she stammers, asking if he is saying she is talented. Derek confirms it and says that if she can conjure up an ice wall the instant she manifests, then she is certainly overflowing with talent. Diella's face lights up in shock and she asks if that means she is some kind of genius. Derek says that having talent and being a genius are clearly different things. Diella snaps back that they are the same thing. Derek tells her they are different, and she huffs, then says fine and sarcastically calls herself amazing before asking what is next. Outside, Raig hears their talk drifting through the garden and clicks his tongue in irritation. The next day, Diella rushes to Derek and says that she can do magic manifestation now, but she cannot get the direction right. She demands that he look, holding up swirling mana. The day after, she says that she tried imbuing it with cold, but something feels off. Derek sits at the table with spellbooks open, spoon in hand, and listens while reading. Another day later, she chases him through the hall again and says that she can feel the magic, but the sensation is weird. Derek keeps walking without looking up, still absorbed in his notes. Next day, at sunset outside near a tree, Diella storms up yet again, calling Derek's name and demanding to know what he is doing there. She scolds him and says she told him to stay near the annex. She asks if her father lent him those spellbooks so he could slack off, and he says yes, he lent them to him for that purpose. Diella glares, then grabs his sleeve and says she succeeded at letting the magic flow out like he said, so he should hurry up and check it. Later, Valerian stands in a bright room with his hands behind his back when the door opens and Derek asks if he called for him. Valerian tells him to take a seat so they can talk, then asks how Diella has been lately. Derek says that she has made quite a bit of progress, but learning 1-star magic will likely take a bit more time. Valerian says that he understands. He says that his mother, who went to a social gathering, will probably return sometime next week, and he warns Derek in advance that she is not someone he can take lightly. He says the people in the estate are fine, but that nobles by nature do not like commoners holding key positions, and he asks if Derek knows that too. Derek says that he will keep it in mind and asks if that is why Valerian called him. Valerian pauses, then says that he is the next head of House Dupline, and that means it is a position where he embraces and includes the members of their house. He says that to do that, he must be sincere with every member, but that it is really difficult because a person's heart can be so deep and profound. He says that it would be nice if everyone's thoughts and values were the same, but that is not the reality. Derek asks what Valerian is trying to say. Valerian admits that Diella will not play with him. He says that he still vividly remembers how she used to welcome him with a smile when they were little, and he asks where he would find another angel like that in the world. He then asks Derek if there is some kind of way, a way to win Diella's favor. Derek asks why Valerian is asking him that. Valerian replies that is because he is the only one Diella follows around. Outside somewhere in the estate, Diella shouts for Derek again, demanding to know where he went as she searches. Before my boy could leave, Valerian stops him again and insists Derek look at something first. He says that he learned how to make dolls from the maids, then asks what Derek thinks. He presents a stitched doll dressed like Diella and proudly asks if it does not look exactly like her, then asks if Derek can feel his big brother love from it. Derek stares at it coldly and asks if Valerian is trying to curse someone. Valerian flinches embarrassed and says Derek is completely useless for this sort of thing. Not long after, Derek stands in the manor while servants and attendants gather. A refined woman approaches with a practiced smile and says she has heard a lot about him, and that they found a very capable magic teacher. She introduces herself as Morella Dibel Duplin. She says that if it would not be an inconvenience, she would like to send him a gift from her territory. Derek answers that he is not affiliated with any house. Morella asks what he means. Derek says that he is a commoner. Morella recoils, eyes widening, repeating in disbelief that he is a commoner. 1 week earlier, a carriage had arrived at the Grand Duke's residence. Aceline told Derek that she was glad they brought him there. She said that as Diella's older sister she wanted to stay by Diella's side longer, but she had a lot to take care of in Ebelstein, so she was leaving Diella to him. Derek answered that he understood. Jaden later clapped Derek heavily and teased that trusting him with her sister sounded lifeless, then told him to wrap things up quickly and come back, warning that if Pelline found out, she would make a huge fuss again. He said he was counting on Derek. As Derek stood near the carriage, Aceline suddenly covered her mouth and said she completely forgot. Jaden asked what she meant. Aceline said her mother would be returning next week, and she forgot to give Derek a heads up. Jaden asked if that was something he needed a heads up about. Aceline hesitated and, in her thoughts, admitted her mother was a little hard to describe, like a god of anger. Back in the present, the doors to the Grand Duke's office opened with a heavy presence. Morella strode in and demanded to know why a commoner was Diella's teacher and what that was all about. The Grand Duke calmly said that he could hear just fine, so she should lower her voice. Morella snapped that lowering her voice was not the problem, and insisted that it was Diella, their beloved youngest daughter. The Grand Duke addressed Morella by name and said that, as she knew, he did not exactly like appointing commoners to positions. But every teacher with a good bloodline threw up their hands and gave up. She demanded to know how he could take in someone who used to roll around in the mercenary world. The Grand Duke stated that finding a decent magic teacher was not easy, and added that Derek was recommended by Aceline. Morella bristled and insisted that even so, there had to be a certain standard. Morella says that they have her younger brother, Flam. She says Flam was busy last time, but it is different now because Diella manifested magic too, so if Flam comes and teaches her. The Grand Duke cuts her off and says she wants to pull the person managing the territory and turn him into a private teacher. He asks if she thinks running Ebelstein will work if they handle it that haphazardly. Morella counters by shouting about Ebelstein's social circle and demands if he thinks that circle runs haphazardly too. then declares that it is a war zone there as well. She points out that socially, a teacher matters more than anything. She rages that Derek is a commoner with no family name, and demands if they want Diella to become a laughingstock when she debuts in high society. Valerian steps in and places a hand to calm her, saying that Mother should calm down for a moment. He says she did not come here just to fight with Father, did she? Morella jerks away and orders Valerian to step aside, saying this is not something they can let slide. A voice cuts in, saying that in the end, the question is whether the commoner mage has the qualities to be Diella's teacher, and he asks his mother if that is not right. Rhaeg moves forward with cold composure and says that a commoner becoming a noble's magic teacher is not a normal situation. He then adds that if the commoner truly has the necessary qualities, he does not think it will be a major problem. He says that he will test the qualities of the man called Derek, and begins to propose defeating him in a magic spar. The Grand Duke cuts him off with a single word and says enough. He states that Derek is the real deal as a mage. Rhaeg falls silent, then pivots and asks what about testing Diella. He argues that if Derek is such an excellent teacher, then Diella, who received his instruction, must have achieved excellent results as well. He says he will personally spar with Diella and verify her results. As they exit the office, Valerian calls Rhaeg's name sharply and demands what on earth he is thinking by suggesting a magic spar. Rhaeg does not soften. He asks if Valerian truly believes Diella has turned over a new leaf, and whether he has forgotten what she has done. Valerian insists that even so, she is their only sister, and they need to hold her close and protect her. Rhaeg scoffs at the mention of blood and says that blood is what has been trying to bring their house down. He says that if she debuts in high society like this, it really will be the end of them. Valerian stares and asks if that is truly how Rhaeg feels. Rhaeg answers that Diella was the first one to cross the line, and says the best thing for Diella is to be kept shut away in the annex. Early the next morning, a bird flutters outside the window as Diella storms into Derek's room, shouting his name. Derek looks up from an open spellbook and asks what it is so early in the morning. Diella slams down the spar notice and says that if she loses this magic spar, he is fired. Derek replies that he heard. He adds that young Master Rhaeg is already a seasoned 1-star mage, so it will probably be difficult to win. Diella explodes and demands if that is all he has to say, shouting again that he is going to get fired. Derek stays seated, holds the rolled document calmly, and says that he is a mercenary. He says that he does the job he is hired to do, and he takes the pay that comes with it, and that is all. He adds that he has already been paid more than enough. Diella's anger falters into confusion, and she asks if he really means that. 1 week later, the Duplain flag flutters above the residence, and the wide courtyard below fills with attendants gathering in orderly lines. The Grand Duke walks out with his wife and a butler at his back, his gaze fixed ahead as if judging the day's outcome before it begins. Derek stands waiting with his cloak drawn close, and he says that the Duke has come. Derek adjusts the front of his cloak without a tremor. Watching him, the Grand Duke thinks that Derek does not look nervous at all, and he wonders if that means Derek is confident. The Grand Duke thinks that Derek has a certain nerve in a situation like this, and he decides that this is not someone they should underestimate yet. Boots approach with measured steps, the hem of a cape swaying, and Rhaeg advances with a cold expression. Rhaeg thinks that this will not be a simple magic spar, and he swears that today he will break Diella completely. He thinks that he will make her regret the pass down to her bones. Diella walks in wearing a red hood, her small steps controlled but tense. She recalls last week when she looks up at Derek and asks if he really means what he said, that he does not care what happens as long as he gets paid. Derek answers that she has probably noticed too, but her magic growth has already gotten on track. He says that she cannot use 1-star magic right away, but it will not take that long. He adds that the reason is simple: she was born with Duplain blood. Diella flinches at the mention of blood and demands to know why he is suddenly saying that. Derek asks if he did not tell her before. Then he brings up the School of the Wild and says that it is a school that focuses on self-study rather than passing things down. Diella bursts out, demanding to know why he is saying that kind of thing right now, her voice cracking with frustration. Her eyes tremble, and she forces herself to speak anyway. She says that she knows she is not that great of a student, but she still wants to keep learning magic from him. She says that she does not want anyone else as her teacher. Derek stays silent for a moment, his back half turned, the wind tugging at his cloak. Then he tells her in advance that he does not know the etiquette or rules for nobles' magic spars, and he admits that he has never done one. He says that even so, he can teach her how to win in a fight, and he asks if she wants to win. A dark memory resurges around her, murmurs coil through the crowd like smoke. People whisper that it looks like Lady Diella does not have any magic after all, and they sneer that even that famous teacher gave up on her. Someone wonders how something like her could come out of Duplain, and another mutters that Duplain's past its prime, and that is all. Several voices complain that the little thing only knows how to cause trouble, and they speculate that the Grand Duke must have a lot on his mind. Others say that at least there is Lady Eislein, and one voice spits that his child is the one who will bring him down. Someone finishes by saying that it is better not to give birth to something like that. Diella hears it all anyway. Tears cling to her lashes, but her stare hardens as she looks Derek in the eyes. She answers that he should make her win. Back to the present, Diela steps forward. Diela did not come there as Raig's younger sister, much less as the youngest of House Duplain. She stood there only as Derek's student and a mage. The Duplain crest flutters over the estate. Lady Diela steps forward in a red hooded cloak, facing Raig with sharp green eyes. The butler clears his throat and says that they will be applying the sparring rules used by the high-rank mages of the Ibelstein Kelbram Salon. He adds that whichever side triggers General Pelham's protective magic circle first will be declared the loser. Raig sets his jaw and says that they should begin. Derek watches quietly and thinks about the pendant accessory, the General Pelham's protective magic circle, recognizing it as a safeguard that activates right before the wearer would take major damage, nullifying the opponent's spell. He thinks that this is how nobles fight, wasting expensive accessories on something as trivial as a spar, and he notes that the duration is 10 minutes, judging from the mood that Raig plans to end it sooner than that. Raig raises his hand and chants, green rings of mana spiraling outward like slicing wind. Even as the pressure rolls across the terrace, he thinks that he has to send Diela back to the annex. Diela's cloak whips in the turbulence. She stands calmly until the attack reaches her before dodging to the side, and she starts running. Raig's eyes harden as he watches her evade and he bristles, thinking that she has nerve. He swings his arm again, sending another surge to crush through, but Diela keeps moving, bracing and redirecting with raw, straightforward one-star magic. Derek studies her form and thinks that she handles one-star magic with ease, but that she is still a complete beginner in real combat. He realizes that she is forcing the trajectory, just to make her attacks and blocks connect, and he warns himself that she will burn through mana fast if she keeps doing it. She plants her feet and forces her mana forward, throwing up a towering wall of ice. The green current slams into it and she darts aside, narrowly slipping through the gaps in the swirling flow as the wind magic curves after her. Raig stares at the ice wall and judges it as nothing more than manifested power, not a real star-rank technique. He thinks that she cannot block his magic with a trick, then decides he will break through with firepower. He glares and challenges her to try blocking what comes next, gathering multiple green spell lights that whirl and swell like concentrated storms. As the pressure builds, Diela's breathing turns ragged, but she remembers Derek's earlier words and the way he drilled them into her. That mercenaries fight differently from nobles, that they do not treat fair play as a virtue, that their only focus is victory. She recalls him warning that this is far from a typical noble duel, that even winning can earn criticism, but that she can still choose an ending where she wins. She remembers him asking if she is really fine with that. Diela clenches her shaking hands, lifts her chin, and answers that she is, without hesitation. Diela stands in her red hood and fixes her blue eyes forward. Green mana whips through the air in crescent blades, and the wind pressure rolls in like a storm. Diela drives herself low and runs, her cloak flaring as she slips past the edge of the cutting flow. The green arc carves into the floor with a violent hiss, gouging the boards and throwing splinters up where she was a moment ago. As she keeps moving, she recalls the lesson Derek drilled into her, and she repeats to herself that among mercenaries there are people who keep winning even when there is a gap in strength. She reminds herself that those people do not duel, and they fight. She tells herself that fighting means controlling the battlefield by using the terrain and surroundings, and that they will use anything and everything available to seize victory. She forces herself to remember that she must even seize the very short moment when the opponent drops their guard. Raig tightens his stance and drives another spell forward, confident enough to say that it is over. The next blast slams down with crushing force, and ice fractures under the impact as another wind slash comes at her from behind. The strike tears across the terrace and connects, sending dust and debris upward. Derek watches calmly while their mother snaps into panic and shouts at Dylan to stop the spar immediately, insisting that Yahello is hurt. The Grand Duke answers coldly and tells her to sit down, then says that it is not over yet. When she protests and insists that Yahello was clearly struck by the attack, he cuts her off and says that she is wrong, because General Pelham's magic circle did not activate. The Grand Duke falls into silence, watching without blinking. Derek sits below, still as stone, his red eyes steady on the terrace. The Duke watches him and thinks that he did not even blink, then wonders if he already expected Diela to grow to this extent. On the terrace, Raig's expression hardens, as he thinks that she definitely should have been struck by that. He questions why the magic circle did not activate, and he searches for her with a sharp, unsettled glance, wondering where she went. A sudden crack splits the floor by his boot. Before he can shift his weight, a jagged surge of ice erupts upward from beneath him. The blow catches him off guard, ripping him off his feet as he grunts through the impact. He crashes down hard and skids across the terrace, his body twisting as the shock finally breaks across his face. Raig clenches his teeth as cold sweat runs down his face, and he thinks that the attack came from below the platform. He turns his head toward the official standing at the edge and thinks that, by the Kelburn Salon's rules, leaving the platform should count as a loss. When nothing is declared, he lets out a bitter scoff in his head and thinks that they are really treating being below the platform as if it does not count as having left it. He grits his jaw and thinks that the nobles probably never even considered a petty trick like this being used in a magic spar between nobles. He strides across the fractured boards, then slows as he reaches a broken section and peers down. At the same instant, a sharp surge of ice erupts upward with a violent roar, forcing him to recoil as jagged blue spires spear through the air around him and splinters scatter across the terrace. He lands in a wide stance between the rising shards, cloaks snapping in the wind, and his eyes dart across the battlefield. Rhaeg swallows hard and thinks that he cannot see her, and that landing an attack on her will be difficult. He immediately follows that with the realization that all she needs to do is land a single blow on him. He tightens his expression and thinks that this spar has no trace of noble etiquette at all, then calls out for Diela as he scans the floor again. His gaze drops to a gaping hole torn into the platform, and he leans toward it. Below, Diela crouches in the cavity amid dust and debris, her red hood framing a face that stays eerily calm as she looks up at him. Her eyes burn with a steady, controlled intensity, and Rhaeg's breath catches as recognition hits him. He thinks that he has seen that look somewhere before, and he recalls the same unusually calm gaze Derek had when Rhaeg's older brother grabbed him by the collar. Rhaeg's expression darkens as he thinks that Diela could not have come up with this alone. His eyes flick toward the stands where Derek sits with his arms crossed, unmoved. And rage bowls up in Rhaeg as he thinks that Derek is scum and that this must have been his plan. Rhaeg grabs at his cloak's clasp, yanks it free, and flings the heavy fabric away so it spins through the air and drops beside the ice spires. He straightens, lifts his hand as if accepting the rules of this twisted exchange, and says that fine. He will play along, then declares that he will play along with this scheme of hers. The duel presses on. Rhaeg stands alone on what remains of the shattered platform, the stone cracked and splintered by his own magic when he tried to strike his opponent. Broken planks hang at odd angles. Dust drifts through the air. The arena no longer looks fit for nobles. From the balcony, the Duchess cries out in disbelief. She says that she cannot believe Diela would crawl into a filthy pit beneath the stage, calling it disgraceful and unladylike. Her voice trembles as she pleads with her husband to stop the duel at once. The Duke remains composed. He says that she should keep watching, since Diela has not violated any rules. His expression stays calm, thoughtful, and possible to read as his eyes follow the chaos below. Beneath the broken floorboards, Diela kneels in darkness. Shards of glowing ice hover faintly around her, casting cold light over the dirt, smudged planes of her face. Her eyes are wide, steady, burning with focus. In that stillness, something changes. For the first time, she sees it clearly, the flow of mana moving through the air like invisible currents made visible. Above ground, Rhaeg stiffens. A sharp jolt runs through him as he senses the shift in her presence. Surprise flashes across his face. Suddenly, jagged pillars of ice burst upward from below. He leaps back just in time, boots scraping across cracked stone as the spikes tear through the stage where he stood. He grits his teeth, realizing she is deliberately disrupting his casting whenever he tries to chant. He refuses to fall here. Sweat slides down his temple as his eyes dart across the ruined arena. He searches for anything, any advantage. Then he spots a tall flagpole at the edge of the platform. A reckless idea takes shape. Underground, Diela notices something else. The flow of mana from Rhaeg has stopped. She understands immediately that he is planning something. She steadies herself, preparing to strike the moment she senses his next chant begin. At the sidelines, the old butler watches anxiously. He murmurs the young master's name under his breath, worry etched into his lined face. Without warning, Rhaeg moves. He launches himself upward and scrambles up the flagpole with startling speed. As he climbs, he thinks that from this height and distance, she will not be able to interfere with his mana flow. But there is a problem. From such an unstable perch, chanting is impossible. He sees only one path to victory. He decides to pour all his remaining power into a single overwhelming attack, one strong enough to obliterate the entire platform without the need for a chant. Perched at the top, wind whipping around him, he unleashes it. A massive blast of magic roars downward. In the stands, Derek watches the scene unfold, his expression cold and unimpressed. The magical bombardment slams into the stage. Stone cracks. Wood splinters. The pillar beneath shatters under the crushing force. The shockwave travels upward. The flagpole cannot withstand it. Its base fractures. The pole snaps violently, and Rhaeg is thrown into the air, his balance completely lost. A deafening explosion tears through the dueling grounds. Smoke and debris swallow the stage whole. The Duchess screams her son's name in horror as the blast consumes the arena. When the dust begins to settle, Rhaeg lands safely on the ground, bracing himself with one hand. He lifts his head sharply, eyes scanning through drifting smoke, searching for her. Then a figure bursts from the haze. Diela sprints across the ruined stage. Rhaeg reacts instantly. Mana gathers at his fingertips, condensing into a glowing blue arrow. He releases it, and the streak of light whistles toward her. Diela's eyes widen. She twists her body and thrusts out her hand. A surge of her own mana erupts outward to intercept the attack, but the strain is obvious. Shock flashes across her face. The effort nearly overwhelms her. Rhaeg wastes no time. Another arrow forms at his fingertips. Diela sees the projectile coming straight for her. She understands she cannot block this one. Instead of retreating, she changes tactics. She charges directly toward him. Reg allows himself a brief, confident smile. He believes that if even one arrow connects, the duel is his. He underestimates her speed. Before he can react, Diela closes the gap and drives a powerful kick across his chest. The blow snaps his head sideways. He stumbles back in shock. Blood trickles from Diela's lip as she grits her teeth. Reg drops to one knee, clutching his chest and gasping, stunned by the unexpected physical strike. While he struggles to regain balance, Diela plants one hand on the ground and scoops up a handful of dirt and sand from the wreckage. Seeing her chance, she flings it straight into his eyes. In a move unheard of in noble duels, grit and dust scatter across his face. Reg recoils, cursing as he tries to wipe the debris from his eyes. For a few critical seconds, he is blinded. Diela uses that moment to retreat to a safer distance. When his vision clears, realization dawns. If she has resorted to physical blows and throwing sand, then she must be out of mana. He cannot believe she is willing to fight like this. She continues to struggle even when defeat seems inevitable. As he rises slowly to his feet, understanding settles over him. This duel was never just about winning for her, it was about proving her worth. A new resolve forms in his eyes. He decides that he will honor her determination. He will meet her not as a superior mage, but as her brother, and he will give everything he has. The sun shines over the ruined courtyard, casting long shadows across broken stone. Diela stands across from him exhausted. She clutches her head. Her eyes burn with frustration. She has reached her limit. A drop of blood slides down her chin. Her thoughts drift back to a memory from long ago. A voice echoes in her mind, telling her to think of magic as painting with a brush. The memory unfolds. Mana is the paint, the voice explains. The spell is the brush. You do not force it. You gather the paint scattered around you and use it to create a picture. Under a quiet, star-filled sky, Derek demonstrates. Blue mana swirls gracefully at his command. He turns to her and says that this act of creation is magic. The younger Diela looks up at him, and his words open a new world before her. The peaceful memory of that night under the stars fills her with renewed purpose. Back in the present, Diela closes her eyes. A faint smile touches her lips. She recalls the lesson. Mana is the paint. The spell is the brush. A soft blue aura begins to surround her. She ignores the rigid chanting she was forced to memorize. Instead, she reaches out with her will alone. The light around her intensifies. She feels it clearly now, the raw mana in the air responding, swirling, gathering at her fingertips. She opens her eyes. Her gaze is sharp. With this paint, she decides she will create. In a brilliant flash, the mana coalesces. A perfect, shimmering ice spear materializes beside her, suspended within a complex magic circle. She has done it. That is magic. The butler stares in disbelief. His jaw slack, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. The Duchess turns to her husband, her voice shaking. She says that Diela, the daughter they believe to be a failure, is using one-star magic. Reg watches with concern. He says her name under his breath, worried that she might lose control and cause a disastrous accident with such a spell. But Diela stands steady. Her hands do not tremble as she channels the immense power of the ice spear. Seeing the threat, Reg gathers his own mana without hesitation. He charges forward, convinced that the outcome will not change. Even with one-star magic, he believes he remains one step ahead. He is determined to strike before she can. Diela does not retreat. She meets his charge with unwavering eyes. Reg unleashes a volley of glowing magic arrows, aiming to overwhelm her before she releases her spear. Diela releases her ice spear. The two forces collide midair. Magic crashes against magic. A blinding explosion erupts, swallowing the dueling ground in pure, violent energy. The Duchess screams Diela's name, her face pale with terror. When the smoke begins to thin, something extraordinary appears at the center of the impact. A glowing sphere shimmering with controlled power. Having performed its role as an absurdly powerful shield, Reg exhales shakily, drained from the tremendous energy he has spent. Across from him, Diela breathes heavily. Bruised and battered, Derek watches, his intense gaze fixed on the aftermath of the battle, watching everything in silence. 1 year ago, chicks chirped beneath the trees, and birds fluttered past the manor windows in the soft morning light. The bearded duke arrived with several attendants. The butler stepped forward and said that a letter had come from House Belmiard that morning, likely regarding the recent incident. He asked how it should be handled. Through the window, the duke saw Diela sitting alone in the light, staring ahead without expression, and he fell silent. The protective circle had activated. Derek lowered his eyes and Diela admitted to herself that he had lost. Diela's composure collapsed. She clutched her head and sobbed openly on the ruined boards. Her mother erupted again, calling the duel vulgar and filthy, about that so-called master and the disgraceful methods he had taught. A memory surfaced in the duke's mind. A young soldier stepping forward and introducing himself as Raymond Oswald Duplain, saying that it was an honor to serve under the duke's command. Another man had remarked that the soldier's eyes resembled his father's, filled with ambition. Raymond had answered with gratitude. The memory faded. In the present, the duke studied Diela and thought that her gaze had sharpened. Servants rushed onto the platform. One asked if Lady Diela was all right. Another insisted she receive treatment at once. She pushed them away and approached her brother, then she bowed without saying a word. Reg acted awkwardly and said that she had done well. Diela remained hunched, wiping tears from her cheeks. Several maids gathered around her and offered to escort her inside. She pulled away and walked off despite their concern. In the quiet garden, Derek sat alone on a bench by the wall, his red eyes calm. Diela stopped before him, trembling. She said that she had lost and added that she was sorry. Derek looked up and said that it was all right. He added that he was fine as well and told her to overcome this frustration and grow stronger. Her restraint broke. She let out a raw scream that tore from her chest. A maid cried out in alarm. Her mother rushed in, shouting Diela's name. She dropped to her knees, seized her daughter's arms, and said that her poor child had suffered enough. Her mother pulled her into a tight embrace and said that everything was all right now. She urged her to receive treatment immediately. Diela, shaking and tear-streaked, said that she understood. The maids led her away. Her mother remained behind, wiping her eyes. Derek turned to leave. Diela's mother strode toward him and exploded in anger. She called him vulgar and demanded whether he understood what he had done. She said that teaching a 1-star spell was nothing impressive. Derek stayed silent. She slapped him and accused him of staining a noble lily with cheap tricks and forcing disgrace upon the Grand Ducal House's daughter. She insisted that he could never understand noble values and dignity. Diela's father approached and told her to look at the situation properly. He stated that what happened was not even a true magic duel. When she continued to protest, he fixed her with a sharp slap and asked whether she truly did not see who was behaving most disgracefully. She recoiled and asked why, insisting that Derek was only a commoner. The Duke answered coldly that even if he was a commoner, he was their daughter's teacher, and he asked what kind of parent would treat a teacher that way. The white-haired boy lowered his head in silence. The Duke asked him to forgive her, explaining that every parent loves their child in their own way. The boy said that it was fine. The Duke invited him to the reception room to speak privately. His wife could only watch in frustration. Inside his office, the Duke praised him, saying that he had raised Yahello well and that, as master of the estate, he should grant a reward. He explained that the highest spell legally permitted to a commoner was 3-star magic and directly asked whether he desired it. The boy realized that the Duke had seen through him, even sensing an ambition he had barely admitted to himself. He thought that opportunities must be seized when they appear. He answered that he wanted it. The Duke acknowledged this and said that although he had taught Diela 1-star spell effectively, that level was not enough for survival in Ebelstein's high society. Derek replies that there are many in Duplain who could guide Lady Diela. Now that she grasped the basics, she'll grow quickly. The Duke argues that what she needed was not merely an instructor, but a master. As ink drips from a pen onto parchment, the man continues, saying that the boy harbors an ambition a commoner is not even allowed to dream of. Derek notes that the Grand Duke has not spoken with him much. The Duke asks if he understands how insulting such ambition would feel to lofty nobles, which is why he chooses to overlook it this time. The fact that the Duke knows that he aims to go beyond 3-star magic was truly frightens Derek. The boy listens in silence as the man adds that if he holds such intentions, he cannot remain in a place like this for long, and asks if he is already prepared to leave. The boy answers calmly that yes, that is correct. The man says that he does not fail to see his ambition, but insists that he must teach Diela a little longer. Once again, he repeats that the highest realm permitted to a commoner is a 3-star spell, and asks if he desires it. The boy meets his gaze without hesitation and says that yes, he wants it. Derek slips into the library's warm light and pulls a thick, leather-bound tome from a tall shelf. Dust drifts as he opens it, his gloved finger tracing dense writing and intricate magic circles stamped across the pages. He falls silent, then thinks that it is amazing. He reflects that many people spend their entire lives trying to obtain even a single 2-star spellbook, yet the shelves here are filled with 3-star spellbooks. He concludes that with this, he has every reason to stay in this mansion longer, then adds that Pelling would cause an uproar if she found out. Elsewhere in the estate, the commotion carries faintly, and time passes under a clear sky where birds wheel overhead. Diela appears outside, newly bandaged and standing with forced pride. She lets out a small sound of satisfaction and declares that she is a 1-star mage now. Derek answers calmly that since she did cast a 1-star spell once, she can be called a 1-star mage. Diela goes quiet, then protests that this is all he has to say, and complains that his student achieved something and he does not even look happy. He insists that it was not an early achievement, as if that is what makes it disappointing. She exhales as though tired of arguing and remarks that he is not easy. Derek observes that she seems to have recovered quite a lot in 3 days. Diela stiffens when he brings up the past when she cried a lot back then. She immediately denies it, insisting it was only dust, just a little dust that got in her eyes. She adds that her father should have told her earlier, admitting she thought he was about to be kicked out. Derek shifts the topic and asks if they should start the lesson. He tells her that since she is growing quickly, she will learn other 1-star spells soon. Diela blinks, confused, and asks what he means by quick. Derek explains that her growth has only been this fast since her mana awakened, and that casting even a 1-star spell is rare. He continues, as if reminding her of something he said before, and she tries to follow along. Diela eagerly suggests what they should do first, listing spells she wants. Mana arrow because it looked convenient without chanting. Wind blade because her brother Rag used it, and it looked strong, and ice spear because it seemed nice. She even muses that if she improves a bit more, she could probably hit her brother Rag too. Derek cuts through her excitement and states that they will practice mana manifestation. Diella blurts out why, pointing out that she thought they were learning 1-star spells. Derek says there are many reasons, but in the end the fundamentals are the most important, and he starts to simplify it by saying that ultimately mana. Diella gives in with reluctant resolve and says they should do it, adding that if he says so, then that is that. Yet her face betrays her disappointment as she admits she got excited for nothing, thinking she would learn 1-star spells right away. She catches Derek watching her, and asks why he is looking at her like that, wondering if there is something on her face. Derek tells her there is nothing, and admits he is just surprised she is listening so obediently. Diella flares up, demanding what kind of person he thinks she is, and insists that she respected what he said from the beginning. Derek repeats her words under his breath, lingering on the phrase from the beginning, and his mind flashes back to her grinning as she dumped dirty water over his head. Twice. Back in the present, he reminds her that she poured dirty water on his head twice. Diella freezes, then asks if he still remembers that, and Derek answers flatly that it is hard to forget. Diella dashes across the terrace, laughing wildly that the weather is nice. Trying to change the subject, she says that mana manifestation sounds fun and that she wants to practice already. He watches her excitement and smiles wryly. Night settles over the estate beneath a bright moon. Out on the grass, Diella lies sprawled on her back, chest heaving as she pants and huffs, sweat and scuffs marking how hard she pushed herself. Standing above her in the cool night air, the teacher remarks that it sounds like she will get busy soon. Diella keeps catching her breath, then shifts up while the teacher lowers himself closer, and she says that she heard it too. Rubbing her head in frustration, Diella mutters that it is whatever, then admits that starting next week she will have etiquette classes as well. The teacher asks if that is a good thing, explaining that since she learned a 1-star spell, she will now receive true noble education. Diella challenges that idea, listing basic noble etiquette, foreign languages, geography, history, botany, piano, and sewing, and she says that she does not understand why she has to learn all of that. Looking up with wary disbelief, she wonders how Sister Isoline endured it. The teacher states that this is why Isoline is called the Flower of Dupline, and he adds that she is the center of Ebelstein society. Diella, still fixated on what she wants, says that she only wants to study magic. The teacher tells her to do so, then says that the Grand Duke hired him, so they have plenty of leeway. She wonders whether there truly is that much time. He asks who would fire him now. Diella answers that of course there is someone out to get him, pointing out that her father acknowledged him, but her mother will not leave it alone. With her gaze turning serious, Derek asks why the madam wants to drive him out. She explains that learning from him distances her from noble dignity, and she says that madam fears she will become like a mercenary. She adds that even the duel was far from the dignity nobles pursue. The teacher falls silent, eyes lowered, then says that the solution is simple. He addresses her as Lady Diella and says that silencing madam is not actually that difficult, instructing her to remove madam's justification. Diella blinks, caught off guard, and lets out a confused sound as the meaning sinks in. The next day, the grand buildings stand under a bright sky while footsteps echo inside. Madam walks the corridor with her hands folded, posture stiff, servants moving in the background as she advances with measured steps. In her thoughts, she bristles that it is unbelievable Diella met such a dreadful teacher, and she laments that her poor child has suffered. Her mind flashes through grim images of that teacher's influence, his ruthless grin, his presence framed like a fighter rather than a tutor, while a harsh warning rings out that Diella must watch carefully, because this is the mercenary way, followed by Diella answering that she understands as his student. Another vision overlays it, Diella striding and boldly carrying a boar like a savage, and declaring that this is the famed Ebelstein High Society, while people shriek her full name in disgust and fear. The pressure builds until Madam clutches her head and groans that it hurts, then thinks bitterly about what a lowborn could possibly teach Diella. Her resolve hardens as she insists to herself that even if her husband approves, she is the lady of this house. Pressing her fingers to her temple, she thinks that she must find a way. A voice calls out to her and Diella steps forward, addressing her mother. Madam turns with a softened smile and calls Diella back warmly, speaking as if nothing is wrong. With a practiced tenderness, she says that even if people call Diella immature, this mother likes it when she smiles in her arms. Then she falters mid-expression, the warmth slipping as uncertainty flashes across her face. Diella approaches in a neat blue dress, poised and composed, and asks whether her mother rested well last night. Madam startles, a bead of sweat forming as she blurts a confused response. Diella meets her mother with a gentle smile and says that she could not leave her room because she was treating her injuries, so she regrets missing the chance to talk. She adds that there are many things she wants to share, but she explains that she has piano lessons this morning. Her mother looks taken aback and answers that she understands. Diella places a hand over her chest and says that she will go first since she is busy with her classes. Her mother hurriedly calls after her, asking if the etiquette classes have not started yet and saying that they begin next week. Diella answers that this is correct. With a composed expression, Diella says that thanks to her mother's concern, she is truly looking forward to those classes. Her mother falters, then tells her to hurry because she will be late. As she walks away, a maid is so shocked by Diella's attitude that she drops what she was carrying. Acting unlike herself, Diella walks up to the maid and asks if she is hurt. She urges her not to overexert herself. The brown-haired maid freezes, sweating as she forces out a stuttering acknowledgement and addresses Diella properly. Nearby, Diella continues on, her blue skirt swaying as she walks away from the gathering. Behind her, Diella's mother remains still, watching from where she stands, her gaze lingering as the servants and the maid look on in shock while Diella leaves the courtyard. Beyond the northern wall of Ebelstein lies the district where the nobility gathers. Recently, Aisline's smile has returned. Until the last gathering she had looked so troubled that it caused real concern. Aisline admits that it was more obvious than she intended. She explains that she never meant to worry anyone, but most of the matters that had been weighing on her have now been resolved, and she feels far more at ease. The one speaking is Alent, the second daughter of Count Bulmildi. She says that she had been extremely worried after hearing that Aisline often have ventured outside the noble district to help others. Aisline thanks her for the concern. She explains that her recent business was actually due to personally searching for a magic tutor for her younger sister, Diella. At this, Alent cannot hide her surprise. She remarks that anyone worthy of being sought out personally by Aisline must be an extraordinary mage. Denise, the second daughter of the Bertus family, asks whether Aisline is referring to her sister, Miss Diella. Aisline confirms that she is. She says that she saw Diella at the estate not long ago and was stunned by the transformation. She explains that Diella now carries herself like a refined young lady, so different from before that it feels as if she has become another person entirely. She adds that she has heard Diella can now even cast one-star magic, and that her poise is so impeccable it makes Aisline feel she must work twice as hard herself. Denise grows curious. She points out that the Dupreen family had never shared much about Diella before and asks whether Aisline has found a truly remarkable magic tutor. Aisline says that she has. She explains that although the tutor's background is not particularly distinguished, his ability to teach is exceptional. She states that personally negotiating with the Belgian mercenary corps to secure him was absolutely worth it. The word mercenary strikes both Denise and Alent with visible shock. Alent suddenly remembers that the current head chef of the Beaumilde household had once been driven out of the Dupreen estate by Diella. Rumor has it that the reason was nothing more than serving soup that was too hot. That former little tyrant has now not only reformed but has also become a one-star mage. In that instant, Alent feels an intense curiosity about the magic tutor Aisline mentioned. Alent asks Aisline to reveal the tutor's name. She says that if he is Diella's teacher, he is certain to become well known in the future, and she would like to know his name in advance. Aisline replies that his name is Derek. Meanwhile, Diella informs her mother that Derek has been teaching her a small portion of noble etiquette. She has still learned quite a bit. She admits that relying solely on self-study would have been far too difficult. The Duchess remarks that it is impressive she even attempted to teach herself noble etiquette. Diella clarifies that while part of it was self-taught, most of what she knows was learned through Derek's instruction and lessons. Her mother ignores Derek's contributions and asked whether she encountered difficulties during that process of what she insists is her daughter's self-study. Diella answers that nearly everything was difficult, and she says again that without Derek's guidance she would never have reached his current level. Hearing this, Miliera finds her thoughts, irritated as her daughter won't shut up about Derek. She cannot accept that her precious daughter now mentions that commoner constantly. She does not know what Derek has done to her daughter, but she knows she cannot allow things to continue like this. She can already imagine how events might unfold. Others begin commenting on Diella's recent changes. They say that she has grown kinder even toward commoners and much gentler in temperament. They observe that she seems to be in exceptionally good spirits. In just a few weeks, the transformation is astonishing. The butler remarks that such elegance was once seen only in Aisline, yet now Diella is becoming a true lady. They conclude that she finally carries herself like a noble, and that this is largely thanks to Mr. Derek. Miliera silently swears that she will put an end to this influence. Time passes quickly. Derek studies 3-star magic alone. Though he possesses remarkable talent, he encounters a serious obstacle this time. It feels as though he stands before an invisible threshold separating him from becoming a true 3-star mage. He realizes that the books he has been reading summarize magic according to the orthodox faction, but as a practitioner of the wild faction, he needs real combat experience to advance. At that moment, he hears Reg's voice behind him. He apologizes, asking whether he has interrupted his training. He says that it is no problem and asks what has brought him here. Reg explains that it concerns Diella and that he has something he wishes to discuss. Then he notices the book in his hands and asks whether it is a 3-star magic tome. Derek confirms that it was lent to him by the Grand Duke. Hearing that his father gave Derek the book leaves Reg visibly stunned. Derek says that even if he cannot yet reach that level, studying ahead of time cannot hurt. Reg suddenly recalls that when he once wanted to challenge Derek, his father stopped him. The memory makes him break into a cold sweat. He comments that he truly is remarkable. Derek asks what matter regarding Miss Yahello brought him here. Reg hesitates and says that he is unsure how to phrase it. He asks whether he knows what teenage girls usually like. From his awkward expression, it is clear he intends to apologize to Yahello. He suggests embroidery or perhaps making a doll that resembles Yahello and asks whether such a gift would be appreciated. In that instant, Derek remembers the doll Valerian once made. He immediately rejects the idea with a serious expression, stating that such a gift would absolutely not be appropriate. Reg admits that he had thought the same and clarifies that he had not truly planned to make it himself. After reconsidering, he agrees that it would not be suitable and suggests they head back. As they walk toward the estate, Reg gradually calms down. He says that he is sincerely grateful. He explains that the atmosphere at home has improved greatly. He notes that his brother Valerian is focusing on managing the territory, and although their father does not show it openly, he appears satisfied. Derek responds that the Grand Duke's thoughts are difficult to read, something everyone in the estate likely understands. Reg reflects that he must accept certain realities. He says that people can change, especially children at that age. He wonders whether he simply failed to notice before or deliberately avoided acknowledging it. Since Yahello has changed, he says he also wants to try changing himself. He states that all of this is thanks to Derek and expresses his heartfelt gratitude. Derek lowers his head quietly in response. After a brief pause, he mentions that Yahello's magic seems to be used in a slightly different way and asks whether Reg has noticed the distinction. Reg says that to him, it feels almost like painting. Derek suddenly realizes something. Nobles are nobles, after all. In their perception of magical power, there exists a natural gap between them and commoners that cannot easily be bridged. He explains that Yahello is using the Wild Faction's method of manipulating magic. Reg says that he has heard a little about the Wild Faction before. Derek speculates that once Yahello reaches a certain level, she may be able to continue her research independently, and that at that stage, a teacher's guidance might actually become an obstacle to her growth. He replies that once someone reaches a certain level, there will always come a day when they see the light. Before anyone realizes it, 2 months have passed since Yahello began to change. One day, Yahello notices the flowers and asks how it got there. The maid explains that she saw the flowers blooming so beautifully that she wanted to tuck one into her hair, so she brought them along. Yahello comments that the fragrance is lovely and says it feels as though spring has lingered throughout these past months. She now uses star magic with complete ease. She has also grown much closer to the servants. Looking back, she admits she missed far too much before. She says that all of it is thanks to Derek. The maid observes that she seems to be in unusually high spirits and realizes it must be the day of her magic lesson. Yahello wonders whether she truly looks that happy and insists the flower must be placed carefully so it looks its best. She keeps one blossom for herself, explaining that she plans to give it to Derek. Not long afterward, that very flower drops heavily to the ground. The girl who had been brimming with anticipation is struck by sudden news. Tears quickly fill her eyes. She asks what it means. Valerian, who oversees the territory's affairs, confirms that what she heard is true. Derek explains calmly that given Yahello's current level, he no longer has anything left to teach her. He compares it to the cycle of the seasons, saying there is no endless winter, and therefore no eternal spring. Her magic lessons are ending. Derek believes the Grand Duke has already realized that Yahello belongs to the Wild Faction and possesses a strong personal style. He says that if he continues guiding her, he might end up clipping her wings instead of helping her soar. The Grand Duke acknowledges this and states that there is now no reason to keep Derek at the estate. Derek agrees. After a brief silence, the Grand Duke rises from his seat. He admits that many things have changed thanks to Derek. He says that because of him, his daughter was able to grow. He confesses that he focused so heavily on managing the territory that he failed, in some ways, as a father. Now he says he can finally feel at ease. He asks when Derek intends to depart. Derek explains that Miss Iceline will soon visit the estate before returning to Ebelstein, and he plans to leave in her carriage at that time. The Grand Duke nods and requests the return of the library key. Derek replies that he will return the magic books he is currently reading and hand the key back through the steward. The Grand Duke tells him there is no need for such formality and asks for the key now. Derek immediately understands. His eyes shift to the 3-star magic book hanging at his waist. When the Grand Duke dismisses him, it is clear that the book is a gift. Neither of them says it aloud. Derek bows deeply and leaves the study. In the corridor outside, Yahello has been waiting in silence. Derek has no idea how long she has stood there. Yahello says that he appeared suddenly in her life and now plans to leave just as suddenly. Derek asks what he can possibly do. Yahello admits she knows he will not change his decision, but she still has to ask whether he truly must leave, whether staying is impossible. Hearing the urgency in her voice, Derek explains that he will return to life as a mercenary and continue pursuing magic. He says that if Yahello keeps strengthening herself, then when she debuts in Ebelstein's social circles, they will surely meet again. By then, he may have advanced further and be able to teach her something new. Dyla complains that he is frustrating and always leaves her speechless. That night, she dreams the nightmare she had not seen since Derek first entered her life. The harsh whispers and malicious laughter return, even though she is now a one-star mage. Even though she carries herself like a proper noble lady, she feels as helpless as before he arrived. She jolts awake, drenched in sweat. Moonlight slips through the curtains into the darkened room. She realizes it was only a dream and struggles to steady her breathing. A maid rushes in after hearing her scream and anxiously asks whether she is hurt. At the sight of the maid, a dangerous thought flashes through Dyla's mind. Derek is leaving because there is no reason for him to stay. But if she were to turn everything upside down again, like before, perhaps that reason would return. She remembers clearly that Derek once told her that the choice has always been in her hands. The maid, frightened by Dyla's expression, asks again whether she feels unwell. Dyla hesitates. If she makes a scene now, Derek might stay. In the end, she says she is fine. She realizes that throwing a tantrum would only deny everything Derek has done for her. Even if he leaves, she cannot let his efforts become meaningless. Time moves quickly and the day of departure arrives. At the entrance to Ebelstein, Aceline asks whether they should disembark there or continue to the commercial district, that the commercial district will be more convenient. Derek expresses gratitude for all the care he has received. Aceline suggests they exchange final farewells as they are about to leave. Derek turns back. Unlike the day he first arrived, this time all the younger members of the Dupreen family have come to see him off. Valerian asks whether he is truly leaving now. Derek confirms that he must return to where he belongs. Reg remarks that life at the estate could not have been easy and thanks him for his hard work. He adds that if he ever needs assistance, he should reach out, and they will help however they can. Derek expresses sincere thanks. They nod to one another, and he bows in return. When he lifts his head, his gaze finds the only person who has not spoken. Dyla raises her chin slightly and stares at him with forced pride. She demands to know why he is looking at her that way and asks whether he expects her to cry and beg him to stay. She insists she is no longer a child. Derek says that it was an honor to teach her. He adds that although she may not be able to openly declare him as her teacher, he hopes she will at least remember the magic he taught her. Dyla immediately rejects that notion. She declares that she fully intends to proclaim him as her teacher openly, and says that even if he wishes for a quiet life, that may no longer be possible. After all, he is the teacher of the remarkable Miss Dyla. She expects a response, but Derek simply watches her in silence. That silence makes her chest tighten even more. She tells him not to get injured working as a mercenary. He replies that he will be fine and urges her instead to take care of herself. She insists there is nothing to worry about. She says she is already an adult now and can take care of herself. At that moment, an old memory surfaces in Derek's mind. He once said those same words when Cardia left him. Back then, Cardia did not look relieved. Instead, she held him tightly, her expression even more worried than before, and whispered a short sentence in his ear. At the time, he could not understand it. Now, years later, standing before his own disciple as she declares herself grown, Derek finally understands. She is still so young. The road ahead is long. The world is filled with unseen currents of magic, and life will bring confusion and hardship. On the waves of that uncertain future, the small figure claiming adulthood looks painfully fragile. So Derek repeats the words once given to him. He tells Dyla that there is no need for her to become an adult so soon. Her pupils widen. She bites her lip, struggling to suppress her emotions, but tears spill over anyway. Her eyes redden as she blinks quietly. Realizing time is short, she stops pretending. She says goodbye to Derek. Tears stream down her face, yet she smiles and waves farewell to her teacher. She will soon step into Ibelstein's social world, so Derek tells her they will meet again there. He addresses her once more, calling her Miss. Not long afterward, the carriage rolled to a stop in the commercial district of Ibelstein. When Derek pushed open the tavern door, he was greeted by a chaotic sight. A blonde girl was in the middle of beating up a chubby boy. The girl immediately recognized him and exclaimed that Derek had finally returned. Derek did not answer with words. He simply smiled faintly. He was home. With Dyla's magic lessons concluded, Derek had returned to his homeland. The bartender set a mug down in front of him and remarked that while it could not compare to the tea served in noble estates, it was his favorite honey wine. Since it was meant to welcome him back, the speaker insisted on paying. Derek offered his thanks. The blonde girl squinted at him and asked whether he had always been this pale. She remarked that after spending time among nobles, he seemed to have grown even worse somehow. She demanded to know how Derek had managed to make nobles listen to him. She pressed him to explain what really happened. Derek brushed it off, saying it was just work and nothing worth discussing. She accused him of acting like a noble and insisted something must have happened. The tavern master finally told Pelline to stop pestering him. She complained that she had nearly worked herself to death while Derek was gone, taking on all the missions alone. The owner added that thanks to that arrangement, Derek must have earned a fortune from noble payments. He asked whether he had at least settled the bill generously. Derek replied that rather than getting money, he had gained something far more important. With that, he placed the magic book he had received from the Grand Duke on the table in front of them. The two stared at it in disbelief and asked whether it was a 2-star magic book. They were stunned that nobles would hand over something so valuable. Derek corrected them. It was not 2-star. It was 3-star. The owner immediately accused him of stealing it and warned that if he were caught, he would lose his head. Pauline declared that if stealing meant getting a 3-star book, she would happily try it too, and asked where Derek had pulled it off. Derek firmly denied stealing anything and stated that the Grand Duke had given it to him as a gift. They scoffed at the idea that a noble would hand such a treasure to a commoner and accused Derek of picking up aristocratic habits, including boosting. It took him quite some time to convince them that the book truly was a gift. Once that was settled, Derek asked whether any new commissions had come in. The owner stared at him and asked whether he was planning to accept a mission after only one day back. Derek replied that a simple extermination job would be best started sooner rather than later. After resting in the comfort of a noble estate for too long, he said he felt slightly dull. He told him not to worry. In their line of work, mages were always in short supply. Derek asked him to arrange something as soon as possible, preferably for the next day. The following morning, under the captain's arrangements, Derek and Pauline set out to clear magical beasts. During Derek's absence, Pauline had struggled handling those missions alone as an archer, facing more than a few dangerous moments. Now that Derek had returned, she no longer had to worry about lacking firepower. They completed several commissions in succession. Exhausted from the workload, Pauline fell asleep early each night. Derek, however, continued as usual. He would find a quiet corner and practice 3-star magic. After so much real combat, his understanding of 3-star magic had deepened considerably. Unlike before, when it felt distant and intangible, he now felt as though he had truly reached its threshold. Still, that threshold remained high. Even so, Derek kept pushing himself. He knew talent alone meant nothing without effort. Time slipped by quietly. By the time Derek could wield 2-star magic with confidence, early winter had arrived in Ebelstein. One day, he and Pauline returned from a mission shivering. Pauline complained that the cold was unbearable and asked how the weather could turn so bitter so suddenly. The captain chuckled and commented that youth was impressive, since they had gone all the way to the Kent Mountains in such weather. Pauline grumbled that they had not known it would be that harsh and asked to warm up inside before leaving again. The captain handed them 2 hot towels. They wiped the blood from their faces and thanked him. Pauline declared that she had barely survived. The captain told them to rest well the next day. Then he added that there was a commission perfectly suited for Derek. Derek asked what kind of commission. The captain described it as simple and well-paid though slightly troublesome. The task had originally gone to the Rohair Mercenary Corps on West Street but had been declined. The request came from the household of Count Bameldi. They were seeking a commoner capable of magic to assist in sparring practice. In simpler terms, they needed a sandbag. As long as Derek endured a few spells, he would receive generous compensation. Derek did not know that the one who issued the request was Alent, an acquaintance of Iceline. On the other side, Alent asked who her sparring partner would be that day. The man explained that in order to practice her new offensive magic, he had specifically recruited a commoner opponent. She questioned whether she had come all the way south from the north just to bully commoners with magic. He replied that practical training required realism. He added that proper compensation had been promised, so she could cast freely. She finally agrees to fulfill her duty as a noble to beat the shit out of a commoner. Her teacher reminded her that this was not mere bullying. The recruited opponent was a 1-star mage, so he would not be completely defenseless. Alent pointed out that she was on the verge of becoming a 2-star mage and remarked that the gap between 1-star and 2-star was vast. Her teacher responded that if she respected her opponent, she should fight with full strength, as that was proper etiquette on a training stage. Soon, under her teacher's guidance, Alent met her opponent. She was surprised by how young he looked, and asked whether he was truly her sparring partner for the day. Derek stood, bowed politely, and introduced himself. At the sound of his name, Alent felt a strange sense of familiarity, as though she had heard it before. They were urged onto the training platform. Alent asked whether he understood the basic etiquette of magical sparring. Derek replied that he had heard of it but only knew the fundamentals. Alent told him to resist as best he could and promised to end it quickly. In truth, she had no desire to torment someone weaker, so she planned to cast a shockwave and knock him off the stage at once. Derek then asked what she meant by resisting and to what extent she expected him to do so. Alent stared at him, baffled by the question. Derek clarified that he wished to know how far he should go resisting in order to be worthy of her training. Her teacher shook his head helplessly at Derek's phrasing. Alent, however, let out a short laugh and asked whether he was deliberately trying to amuse her. She reminded him that she had told him to resist with all his strength. Derek replied that he understood and would follow her command. In the next instant, magic began to bloom in his hand. Blue mana gathered slowly in Derek's palm as he faced Lady Alente in the sparring arena, the space between them heavy with tension and magical power. Lady Alente began a soft, refined chant, all energy condensed in her hand, and as she studied him, she admitted inwardly that this commoner was no ordinary student. Reaching the level of a 1-star mage at his age was not something she could dismiss lightly. Even so, she felt his confidence leaned too close to arrogance, and she believed he needed to learn the unseen boundary that separated nobles from commoners. The moment her chant ended, she released her spell. A violent surge of magic tore across the arena toward Derek, but he noticed it at once and stayed perfectly calm. With a small sidestep and a measured retreat, he avoided it with effortless precision. The attack flew past him and smashed into the trees beyond the arena, exploding through thick trunks as though they were brittle sticks, sending splinters and dust scattering everywhere. Lady Alente narrowed her eyes in disbelief because the ease with which he had evaded her spell felt almost mocking. Derek looked at her with quiet composure and seemed to wonder what she would try next, and that calm expression only provoked her further. Irritation flared inside her. No matter how talented he might be, she believed he had no right to stand so casually before a noble mage. She decided the only proper response was to crush him completely and force him to understand the gulf in both birth and ability. She immediately began another chant. As her voice rang through the arena, glowing circles of cold magic spread across the ground around her feet. From them, countless ice arrows formed in the air like a frozen storm gathering under her command. She was certain that someone at his level could never withstand such an attack. With a sharp motion, she sent them forward, unleashing a barrage of icy projectiles that swarmed toward Derek from all directions. Derek did not flinch. He simply raised one hand and cast what looked like a very basic spell. The instant the two magics met, Lady Alente's eyes widened. That humble spell shattered every single ice arrow before any of them could touch him. The frozen barrage burst into glittering fragments that rained across the arena and fell near her feet, leaving her stunned. She immediately understood what that meant. Such flawless control over a simple spell demanded extraordinary mastery. Nearby, the teacher observing the duel watched with growing interest and thought that the rumors surrounding Derek might not be exaggerated after all. That level of control suggested experience far beyond that of an ordinary academy student, perhaps even lending truth to the stories that he had once lived as a seasoned mercenary. Realizing she had misjudged him, Lady Alente decided the time for probing was over. Golden magic began to whirl around her body as she started chanting again. Brilliant flames of light danced around her like a blazing aura while she admitted to herself that she had been careless. When the spell finished, dozens of radiant golden arrows appeared around her, each one pulsing with destructive force. Derek calmly studied the shift in her strategy and understood that she had abandoned precision. She now meant to drown the entire arena in an attack so large he would have nowhere to escape, and he quietly appreciated how quickly she had adapted. Lady Alente lifted her hand and released the arrows all at once. A storm of golden light crashed toward Derek like a rain of destruction. Seeing that dodging was impossible against such a wide assault, Derek swiftly chanted a defensive spell and raised a barrier around himself, bracing it with both hands as he prepared to withstand the impact. The arrows slammed into the barrier one after another, each collision erupting into thunderous explosions that shook the arena. Dust and debris surged upward and swallowed everything from view. From afar, Lady Alente watched closely, convinced that the unending bombardment would eventually shatter his defense and end the duel. But as the smoke slowly thinned, she saw Derek still standing where he had been, gripping the barrier firmly without a trace of injury. Before either of them could say or do anything else, Derek suddenly sensed rapid movement. Lady Alente had used the exploding dust as cover and rushed him with impressive speed, a massive ice spear in her hand as she launched a close-range strike. Derek was briefly surprised, because at that distance there was barely time to respond, and he admitted inwardly that her battle sense was excellent. He reacted at once. With a flick of his fingers, he released a tiny spell that burst into a blinding flash between them. The light froze the moment and forced Lady Alente to shut her eyes while she muttered in frustration. Trying to steady herself, she cautiously opened one eye, only to find that Derek had vanished from sight. Unable to see clearly, she controlled her breathing and focused on the sounds around her, believing her hearing would guide her to his position. A moment later, she felt a faint trace of magic pass nearby. Sweat formed on her forehead as she wondered whether something had just slipped silently past her. Soon after, she finally caught sight of Derek standing before her once more, with 3 small spells floating calmly around him. Without hesitation, he launched them one after another. She managed to dodge with difficulty, but confusion filled her mind. She could not understand how he had moved so quietly. Watching him more carefully, she finally grasped the truth. He was using a delusion-type spell that erased sound itself, and he had predicted that once her sight was impaired, she would rely on hearing instead. That realization infuriated her because it proved that his earlier attacks had been restrained on purpose. She concluded that he had been holding back from the start. Derek, meanwhile, continued to control his simple spells with calm precision and launched another one, forcing her to block it in haste. Then her eyes widened again as Derek suddenly surged forward, closing the gap with fierce speed. She answered with a confident smirk because rapid spell manifestation was her greatest talent, and she believed that the instant magic formed in his hand, she could counter faster than he could fire. But the next moment caught her off guard. When Derek advanced, magic did not gather in his hands. It flared beneath his feet. Startled by the unfamiliar technique, she leaped backward and quickly realized what he was doing. He was channeling magic through his feet. As she retreated further, she noticed that even the tips of his toes were glowing, releasing small bursts of spellcraft with every step he took. Under that relentless pressure, she barely avoided each strike, but the erratic rhythm eventually threw off her balance and sent her to the ground. The teacher watching the fight widened his eyes and concluded that Derek's style resembled the unpredictable methods of the School of the Wild, where magic flowed freely and could be released from any part of the body. Against practitioners of the disciplined School of Regulation, such freedom made it nearly impossible to predict the next move. Back in the arena, Lady Elente touched her head and looked up at Derek, letting out a nervous laugh as she admitted that he was a remarkably interesting opponent. Her expression held genuine surprise as she confessed that she had looked down on him at first, thinking the rumors were only exaggerated nonsense spread by a loud commoner. She slowly approached him while Derek remained cautious, watching her carefully in case she intended to deceive him again. Then she lowered her head slightly and sincerely expressed her appreciation, explaining that the duel had shown her something truly fascinating and that she was grateful for the lesson he had unknowingly given her. A gentle smile formed on her face, making it seem as though the fight had ended on peaceful terms. But in the very next instant, she revealed how quickly she had learned. A bright spark flashed from the tip of her toe and shot toward him like an arrow, copying the very trick Derek had shown moments before. Derek reacted immediately. He raised a hand, intercepted the spell, and caught it with his own magic. Then, with a sharp swing of his arm, he hurled the captured attack back at her. Lady Elente cried out in surprise and tried to evade it, but at that exact instant, Derek lunged forward with deadly focus and launched another strike while her balance was broken. Lady Elente kept her gaze steady and prepared herself to meet the attack. Their final clash was brief but fierce, and it ended the moment a bell rang clearly across the field, signaling the close of the duel. Derek landed with controlled precision as the lingering glow of magic faded from his hand. Without pride or showmanship, he gave her a respectful nod and conveyed his thanks for the match in a calm, composed manner. There was no arrogance in his posture, no mockery in his expression, only sincere acknowledgement. Lady Elente stayed silent for a moment, letting the weight of her loss settle in. Beneath the bright sky over the estate, the result was clear, yet instead of frustration, a faint smile touched her lips as she acknowledged his ability. She admitted that he was a splendid mage, someone whose talent stood far above the ordinary. Derek answered by turning the compliment back on her. He suggested that the one who truly deserved praise was Lady Elente herself, because standing her ground against someone like him was no small feat. From his point of view, her reflexes and awareness were extraordinary. She received his words with quiet amusement. She sat with a teacup in hand and looked at Derek with open curiosity. She says that he is surprisingly skilled at giving compliments, and that he already seems to know how to deal with nobles. She says that she heard he was born a commoner, but after seeing his ability with her own eyes, she is certain he must have worked brutally hard to reach his current level. Derek answers calmly that he never really had a choice, and that, as a mercenary, he simply had to do whatever was necessary to survive. Elente tells him not to belittle himself like that. She says that she has always respected people who push themselves past their limits. Then, while still holding her cup, she warns him about the old magic instructor standing nearby. She says that the old man does not seem very fond of him, so he should be careful not to irritate him. A moment later, she adds that there is one more thing she wanted to say. She thanks Derek and says that she learned a great deal from that day's training. She explains that the upcoming tournament will be held at the Rosea Salon, and she says that perhaps this time she may finally be able to win. Derek looks at her and says that, at her current level, she has no reason to doubt that. Elente lowers her gaze slightly and admits that she is not truly worried about people weaker than herself. She says that the person she wants to defeat, no matter what, is Aizelin Eleanor Duplin. At that name, Derek falls silent. Elente immediately realizes what she has just exposed, and embarrassment flashes across her face. Inwardly, she scolds herself for saying too much. Trying to recover her composure, she abruptly tells Derek that he may leave now. Derek turned without hesitation, his footsteps echoing against the stone as he walked out of the gazebo. But as he moved away, something in her memory stirred. The name Derek of the Belden Mercenary Corps resurfaced in her mind and linked itself to an old recollection. An image flashed before her eyes. Aizelin, calm as ever, wearing that gentle smile, speaking that very name. The connection struck her like lightning. Without delay, she rushed after him. She reached out and grabbed his wrist, stopping him in place. A sharp breath escaped her as realization set in. With urgency in her voice, she demanded confirmation, having finally connected him to the story she once heard. He was the mercenary who had turned an incompetent girl named Yahello into a mage. By the time they moved inside, the sun had already begun to set, and its fading light stretched long shadows across the estate. Inside the study, the firelight flickered warmly against the walls, standing in sharp contrast to the tension filling the room. Wasting no time, Lady Elente revealed her true purpose. She declared that she was willing to do anything if it meant gaining the strength needed to defeat Aizelin. Her words were filled with resolve, but beneath that determination lay something far more exposed. When questioned further, she clarified that she did not merely want to stand beside Aizelin. She wanted to surpass her. At the very least, she wanted to win the spar that awaited them. Derek watched her quietly, noting the force of her ambition. At first, he described it as intense competitiveness. She immediately rejected that gentler description. Instead, she confessed the truth without disguising it. What drove her was jealousy. She considered that emotion ugly and pathetic, yet she made no attempt to hide it. As she stared down into her tea, her wavering reflection mirrored the unrest in her thoughts. She admitted that the way she had treated Aislinn in the past had been wrong. No matter how often she spread rumors or searched for flaws, Aislinn had responded only with understanding. Rather than retaliating, she'd even tried to embrace her. When asked why she was being so honest, Lady Alente explained that she wanted to prove her sincerity. Even if that meant exposing the most shameful part of herself, she was willing to do it. She knew that Derek, after spending time with the Dupling family, understood both Aislinn's talent and her own shortcomings. That was exactly why she had come to him. The fire crackled loudly, and its glow reflected in both teacups as silence settled over the room. Then, no longer able to restrain herself, she asked what she had to do in order to defeat Aislinn. Derek acknowledged Aislinn's overwhelming strength and implied that she had already surpassed the level most people could even comprehend. She might have already reached a realm that could not be easily measured. Compared to that, Lady Alente's chances were not merely slim, they were almost non-existent. He stated the truth plainly. She could not defeat her. The words hung heavily in the air, but they did nothing to break her resolve. Instead of shrinking back, she leaned forward, her determination growing even harder. Even if her chances were nearly zero, she insisted that she still wanted to win. In her mind, the matter was no longer about whether victory was likely, it was about whether she had the will to pursue it. She then reminded him of something important. He had once taken someone completely hopeless in magic and transformed her into a mage. If he had done that once before, then she wanted to know whether he could do the same for her. Derek fell silent for a brief moment. Then he admitted that there might be a method worth trying. Still, there was hesitation in his voice. Certain concerns troubled him, and those needed to be addressed before he could agree to anything. Her expression changed at once. Desperation gave way to anticipation. She urged him to continue, making it clear that she was ready to hear whatever conditions or problems he had in mind. Derek began by asking whether she even knew how he had taught Lady Diella in the first place. Lady Alente admitted that she did not know the details, but she insisted that it made no difference. She declared that she was prepared to do absolutely anything if it meant winning. Derek then reminded her that he was a mercenary, hinting that certain consequences came with that fact, but she passionately brushed aside his concern. She argued that if he feared people gossiping or mocking a noble lady for learning magic from a mercenary, then he should not. She made it clear that her ambition was real. She declared that she intended to become a figure whose name would echo across the empire, and that failing to stand at the top of Ebelstein's social world would be ridiculous. As Derek watched her in silence, she suddenly struck the table and exclaimed that he must not dare question her sincerity over something so petty. She stressed that she knew exactly what mattered more than pride. After studying her for another moment, Derek calmly clarified that what he meant was simple. Since he was a mercenary, she needed to pay him. She froze for a second, ready to answer, but then stopped. A flush spread across her face as she finally understood him. With awkward embarrassment, she agreed that she could pay him however much he wanted, while nervously remarking that the room suddenly felt far too warm. Derek looked at her with a darkened expression and thought to himself that if she truly meant what she said, then he would have to answer that resolve with methods just as severe. Under the clear sky, Aislinn looked toward the garden and remarked that the next gathering would apparently include a magic duel. Since she had heard that Lady Alente's skills had improved greatly, she said that she also needed to prepare thoroughly. Not far away, Alente overheard those words. The other noble ladies reacted with interest and decided that if another gathering was already coming, then they would have to join as well. When Alente approached, Aislinn and the other young ladies welcomed her. One of them remarked that Aislinn was being too modest, and Aislinn greeted Alente, saying that they had just been talking about her. Alente answered that she already knew, since she had heard Aislinn's voice from down the corridor. Seeing the atmosphere shift, the others quietly suggested leaving the two of them alone. Once they were by themselves, Alente asked with a smiling face whether Aislinn really needed to practice that much. She wondered if Aislinn had ever truly known what it felt like to lose, especially while being praised as the shining flower of the Duplin line. Aislinn accepted that as a compliment and calmly answered that her opponent this time was Lady Alente, so she could not afford to lower her guard. Alente added that she honestly felt more confident now because of her new magic tutor. She admitted that he was only a commoner, but said that his record had been impressive enough to convince her to hire him. Aislinn found that unusual and remarked that it was rare for Lady Alente to personally employ someone like that, which made it seem as though Alente trusted her instructor a great deal. Alente then corrected her and explained that the one who had vouched for that man's ability had not been herself, but Aislinn. Aislinn reacted with confusion. Then Alente revealed with satisfaction that her tutor was none other than Derek. That name visibly startled Aislinn. Alente delighted in that expression and, in her heart, mocked the shock on Aislinn's face. She imagined that Aislinn had to be frustrated, because the man she had failed to keep at her side now belonged to someone else. She inwardly declared that she, Alente Alphone Belmiard, had taken Aislinn's tutor right in front of her. But Aislinn only let out a quiet reaction, then warmly congratulated Alente. She said that Lady Alente truly seemed to be someone with a wise and reliable mind, and she repeated her congratulations with an earnest smile. That answer caught Alente off guard. She awkwardly thanked her while inwardly panicking because this was not the reaction she'd imagined at all. Aislinn then fell into thought. She remembered Diella desperately objecting when she suggested asking Derek for more lessons. In that memory, Aislinn said that Diella's growth had seemed a little stagnant lately and that Derek could surely help if he guided her. But Diella had immediately panicked, insisted that there was no need to go that far, and begged that no one do such a thing. Remembering that, Aislinn quietly thought things over. Alente, meanwhile, kept provoking her in her heart, convinced that Aislinn would understand exactly what it meant for Derek to be taken away and begin showing her anger. Yet Aislinn only continued thinking, then gently tried to say that Derek was actually a bit unusual. Alente immediately cut that off by pretending to notice how late it had become. With a bright smile, she said that she had enjoyed their talk and would take her leave, adding that today had only been their first lesson. As Alente walked away, still flustered and blushing to herself, Aislinn remained where she was and tried to reassure herself. She thought it probably was not anything too serious because Derek did not seem like the kind of person who would do anything truly terrible. From a distance, the silver-haired woman quietly watched the two of them over a cup of tea. Elsewhere, at Belden's team headquarters, Derek pushed those matters aside and told himself that he needed to focus on the work in front of him. The tavern owner looked at the growing pile of requests tied to House Belmyard and complained, asking why Derek's workload kept increasing like that. Derek answered that at least he no longer had to travel all the way to the Earl's estate. He said that as long as he could handle the work here in Ebelstein, it made no real difference to him. The man remarked that Derek made it sound easy, then asked the question that truly mattered, whether their lady could really defeat Lady Aislinn in that upcoming match. Derek answered after a pause that the situation was not a total dead end. While holding his mug, he said that he still had one option left. Derek explained that if Lady Alente could break through the bottleneck of a 2-star mage, then even in a direct clash against Lady Aislinn, they could use the advantage of a higher rank to defeat her and secure victory. The captain listened, then told him to set that hopeful scenario aside for the moment and asked what plan he considered the most realistic. Derek answered that this was exactly what he wanted to discuss. He said he would need his help for the plan, and to keep everything safe, he would also need P-Line's assistance. The captain stared at him in silence, then remarked that Derek was clearly plotting something reckless and far from reasonable. Derek admitted without hesitation that the entire plan was dangerous from the start. At that exact moment, Pelling burst in dramatically and cried out that it was very dangerous. She loudly complained that those people were complete swindlers, saying they had scammed her thoroughly, made her suffer, and squeezed every last coin out of her before she broke into tearful sobbing. Derek and the captain could only sit there in silence as her rant filled the room. After that, money was handed over, and by evening, Derek arrived at House Belmyard to begin Alente's real training. He told her that the first step would be live combat training. He explained that they would repeat that process 10 times, and only after that would they begin examining the finer details of her magic in depth. Alente reacted with disbelief and pointed out that he was throwing her straight into 10 consecutive rounds of fighting. Derek calmly replied that he first needed to observe her true combat ability. Alente noted that this approach suited his mercenary background perfectly, since even his lessons were brutal. Even so, she said she did not mind because she had not hired him to sit around and deliver textbook lectures. Derek accepted that answer and told her that if she was ready, they should begin. The training dragged on until sunset, and by then the courtyard had been left scarred by battle. Alente bent over, gasping for breath, clearly exhausted. Derek thanked her for her hard work and told her to rest for 10 minutes. He then said that after that short break, they would move on to fundamental magic theory. Alente stared at him in disbelief and repeated that it was only 10 minutes, then confessed that she did not have a shred of mana left. Derek answered from behind her that if she truly pushed herself, she should still be able to draw out some mana. After a brief silence, he coldly judged that the shapes of her spells were wrong, and instructed her to sharpen her concentration and create 10 more ice spears. Alente strained herself and forced the magic out again, but Derek immediately pointed out that she was still 5 short. Without giving her room to breathe, he then ordered her to fire another 100 mana arrows. Alente weakly protested that she really had no mana left at all. Derek dismissed that excuse and told her that instead of wasting time complaining, she would do better to create just one more arrow. Alente eventually collapsed flat on the ground, panting heavily. Only then did Derek tell her that she had worked hard during the session and could at least go eat dinner now. He then asked if she was alright and added that if she truly felt she could not continue, giving up was always an option. That immediately made Alente sit back up. She asked if, after putting her through that kind of training, he was seriously telling her to give up. She reminded him that before they began, he had spoken with such grave warnings that she expected something truly unbearable, but in her eyes this was merely ordinary hard work. She declared that he had no idea what she had endured just to survive in the ruthless world of high society, and insisted that this level of training was nothing to her. Derek quietly accepted her words and said that it seemed he had underestimated her. Alente then claimed that she was only slightly tired because she had come straight from a social gathering. She boldly declared that starting tomorrow she would show him what she was really capable of, and told him that from then on he had better raise the training intensity to an entirely new level. She even boasted that this light warm-up had hardly made her break a sweat. Derek paused at her mention of tomorrow and asked what she meant by that. Alente looked confused. Derek then reminded her that he had already said it earlier. He explained that this was only dinner break. Under the darkening sky, Alente could only stare at him and remark that he had a very strange sense of humor. Derek answered coldly that he had not accepted this job to joke around with her. Sunlight burned over the estate as the day's training began. Derek pressed Lady Alente to go further, ordering her to produce 5 more magic arrows. Her body trembled at once, and a pained breath slipped from her lips. Even so, the white-haired instructor insisted that she had not truly reached her limit yet and still had more strength to draw out. Mana wavered around Lady Alente, clearly showing that power still remained inside her. Derek gave her no mercy and raised the demand again, this time ordering 10 more arrows. Her face filled with disbelief as she asks why the number keeps increasing. Left to choose between more manifestation training and a brutal run, she drags her heavy legs forward. She chooses the run, forcing herself through exhaustion until her breathing turns ragged and she finally crumples onto a bench in the garden. Derek steps closer and asks whether she is alright. With a tight, strained smile, she says that this is fun. When he remarks that giving up is still an option, she scoffs and says that surrender has never been one of her choices. That stubborn pride only brings another trial, as Derek declares that her break is over and that it is time for sparring. 2 weeks of merciless effort pass beneath the pale winter sun. At the end of it, Lady Alente lies slumped over a stone table, her vivid red hair spilling across its cold surface. She asks Lady Denise to wake her the instant Lady Aislinn arrives. She admits that the magic training has drained every bit of energy from her body. Denise gently agrees, while Alente says that she has become completely absorbed in her magical studies. Lady Denise looks down at her worn-out friend, curiosity rising in her eyes. She asks why Alente insists on pushing herself this far. The answer that comes is simple and sharp. Alente fixes her burning gaze ahead and says that she does it because she wants to win. She says that second place has no value in her heart. Denise answers with quiet encouragement and says that she will be cheering for her. The calm mood shatters when Lady Aislinn finally appears. Panic shoots through Alente, and she jerks upright so suddenly that the sound echoes against the garden walls. The dark-haired noblewoman walks closer with effortless grace, and that sight alone stirs Alente's competitive fire even more. From farther away, Lady Aislinn suggests that her companions visit a newly opened clothing shop. Alente quickly hides her face, desperate not to meet her directly. She asks Denise whether her rival has already left, terrified that she might have been seen in such a messy, exhausted state. Relief spreads through her when Denise says that Aislinn has gone. Still, the embarrassment of having been sprawled across the table refuses to fade. Denise says that she doubts Aislinn even noticed such a lapse in composure, yet the dark-haired lady lingers for a brief moment. Quiet concern rests in her blue eyes. She observes that Lady Alente looks terribly worn out and wonders whether she is truly all right. The burden of their rivalry lingers heavily, even without a single exchange between them. Later, in the silence of her room, a maid brings Lady Alente an ornate chest. It is a present from House Duplain, sent personally by Lady Aislinn. Inside, the box is filled with expensive elixirs meant to restore mana. The maid explains how valuable the gifts are, but Alente's expression turns cold as frost. She orders the maid to throw away every one of them. The maid is startled and asks if she heard correctly. Alente repeats the command with icy firmness and says that she wants the gifts removed from her side at once. Then she turns back to what matters to her and asks whether Derek has arrived. The maid replies that he has been preparing since dawn. On the nearby table rests a letter that speaks of the coming winter and the snow beginning to fall. It goes on to ask how the young ladies are enduring the cold. Aislinn writes that her territory has produced many fine goods. She says that she wished to share them with the ladies of the salon and hopes they enjoy a peaceful day. As the elegant words are read aloud, Alente's jaw tightens. Her determination only grows harder in the face of what she takes as pity, and she heads out for the next ordeal. Under a sky thick with gray clouds, Lady Alente finds Derek already waiting in the courtyard. He notes that she has come early, but she has no patience for small talk. She demands that he give her a proper evaluation of the progress she has made after weeks of effort. Derek watches her with a blank expression, saying nothing at first, and the silence stretches until she presses him again and forces him to answer. Derek reflects on how long they have trained. Then he looks at her with a blunt honesty sharper than a blade and says that giving up may actually be the better path for her. The words remain hanging in the cold air. It is a direct blow against the fire that has driven her onward, even as it destroyed her health. Anger blazes in Lady Alente's eyes as she asks why he keeps insulting her. Derek gives a dry apology if his words hurt her, but he does not take them back. She straightens herself, her voice shaking with fury, and asks how he could possibly tell her to surrender. She says that her goal has never changed. She says that she has to know how to defeat Aislinn. The confrontation erupts as Alente shouts that she hired him to help her win, not to teach her how to quit. She tells him to leave if he came only to say such ridiculous things, claiming that he is wasting her precious time. Derek does not react to her anger. Instead, he asks one last question, wondering what she will do if victory is simply impossible. His red eyes stay locked on her as he speaks with chilling clarity, saying that obsession with winning often halts a person's growth. In his view, humbly accepting defeat can sometimes be necessary for real progress. Lady Alente recoils, tears gathering across her face. To her, such a road feels unbearably pathetic. She finally lays bare the truth of who she believes herself to be, reminding him that she is only a shameful and petty woman who spread rumors about Aislinn. The titles others gave her, such as Belmard's Pillar and the Flower of Rosiah Salon, feel to her like empty falsehoods. A hollow sense of worthlessness swallows her as she insists that she is nothing like those grand images. Her voice breaks as she admits that petty jealousy has consumed her. She cries out that she accepts the truth at last, acknowledging just how inadequate and pathetic she really is. Now that she has confessed everything, she says there is no reason left for her to keep hating Aislinn. Derek stays silent as she trembles before him. Even though she understands the truth of her situation, she still cannot understand why her heart remains so unsettled. The burden of her petty inferiority complex keeps crushing her from within. She asks why it still refuses to disappear. In the end, only one phrase can describe what is tormenting her. It is self-hatred. With painful honesty, she explains that she wanted him to witness just how serious her resolve truly was, even if that meant exposing the ugliest parts of herself. Now she has questions of her own. A quiet hatred toward herself had always existed inside Alente. Her mind had never stopped racing toward one goal alone, finding a way to defeat Aislinn. At first, it might have looked like nothing more than rivalry or envy, but the source of her suffering ran much deeper. She never truly hated Aislinn. The one she despised most was herself. This was never about a shallow grudge. To her, victory had become the only way to escape the inferiority and self-loathing that had wrapped around her heart. Moved by the weight of her confession, Derek steps forward, the wet ground splashing beneath his feet, and gives her a simple, firm answer. He says that they will win. His expression hardens with absolute certainty. He says that he will make sure she defeats Lady Aislinn. Sunlight catches against his silver hair as he makes that promise. Alente slowly looks up. A new spark begins to rise inside her. She quietly accepts his words and agrees to walk the path ahead. Some days later, the scene shifts. A carriage travels forward before stopping at a grand estate revealed to be the territory and residence of Count Belmar. From inside, Lady Alente's former teacher steps out alone. As he surveys the area, a red-haired noble approaches with calm composure, welcomes him, and says that the trip to Everstein must have gone smoothly. Maintaining proper manners, the teacher offers his greeting and asks after the Lord's well-being. The red-haired noble answers that the journey must have been tiring and invites him to sit and rest. The two men take their seats and settle into a calm exchange. After a brief pause, the noble remarks that it has been quite a while since he last saw Lady Alente and says that he is curious about how she has been doing. The teacher replies that she is doing well and says that she has recently been devoting herself to improving her magic. Hearing that, the red-haired man reacts with open amusement and admiration. He says that he has never met a girl with such remarkable talent and adds with confidence that it will not be long before she surpasses even him. As the teacher watches the red-haired lord, anxious thoughts fill his mind. He realizes that the truth can never be exposed, because if anyone learns that Lady Alente is being trained by a mere commoner, both of them will face severe consequences. Meanwhile, the noble casually mentions that he also has matters to handle in Everstein, prompting the teacher to respond with polite curiosity. The man then says that he would like to surprise Lady Alente with an unexpected visit and a gift, wondering how she might react. On the outside, the teacher keeps his composure and says that Lady Alente would surely be delighted. Inside, however, dread grips him, and he can only hope to survive the ordeal without disaster. The scene then shifts to the outskirts of Everstein, where a massive door stands ominously at the entrance to the nameless labyrinth. There, Pelini voices her unease and says that something about the situation feels wrong, questioning whether it is really wise to send someone as delicate as Alente into a dungeon. Jaden calmly responds that Derek must have already thought everything through. As uncertainty spreads among the group, Alente suddenly realizes with shock that she is the one expected to enter the dungeon. Startled and overwhelmed, she asks what exactly she is supposed to do inside and whether she is simply meant to fight monsters head-on. Derek finally steps in and reassures her that this is the weakest dungeon in the region. He explains that her task is to sharpen her instincts through real battle and adds that he and the others will be watching over her to keep her safe. Still shaken, Lady Alente asks whether this is truly serious, as if she can barely believe it is happening. In response, Derek releases an intense burst of energy and says in a firm, unwavering tone that the duel is only a few days away and that they have almost no time left, making this the most efficient preparation possible. With that, he begins moving forward with the others. After hearing everything, Lady Alente grows even more uneasy, as it is clearly her first time entering a dungeon filled with monsters. Soon, all four of them advance together in an unsettling silence that only makes the tension heavier. After a short while, driven by fear and curiosity, Lady Alente hesitantly asks what exactly is waiting for them inside. Derek sternly tells her to stay alert at all times, emphasizing that even the weakest dungeon can still be dangerous. His warning only makes her more nervous. At that moment, Pilim, who has been watching their surroundings carefully, suddenly warns that a horde of goblins is coming. Lady Alente panics immediately and cries out in alarm. Derek, however, stays composed and says that he already sensed them approaching from behind. A moment later, Jaden points out that something even bigger is approaching and identifies it as a creature resembling an ogre. Hearing that only worsens Lady Alente's fear and leaves her even more shaken. As the pressure rises, Derek turns to Jaden and asks whether he can handle the ogre. Jaden remains completely calm and answers with a confident smirk, implying that his willingness depends on the payment. Derek releases a powerful wave of energy and firmly says that compensation can be discussed later, making it clear that survival comes first. At once, all of them turn their attention forward, where countless glowing eyes begin to emerge from the darkness and draw steadily closer. Overwhelmed by the terrifying sight, Lady Alente freezes in place, her body trembling as the reality of fighting monsters finally sets in. Before she can recover, the goblins rush toward them. Derek immediately moves to the front and intercepts the attack head-on. Behind him, Lady Alente can barely even form words, her fear nearly robbing her of speech. Derek reacts at once, ordering Pelini to protect her, then dashes into battle with precise swordsmanship. Pelini supports from a distance, firing arrows with expert accuracy to eliminate threats from multiple directions, while Derek combines his blade and blazing fire to cut through enemy after enemy as the team carries out their roles with perfect coordination. In the middle of the chaos, Alente remains rooted in place, too overwhelmed to understand what she should do, her mind paralyzed by fear and confusion. Then she suddenly senses a massive presence behind her and realizes it is the same creature they discussed earlier. The scene shifts to Jaden, who stands firmly in its path with calm confidence, holding his sword as he remarks that he is curious about the bounty placed on the monster. Without warning, the giant goblin charges at him, but Jaden steps forward in one swift motion and cleanly severs its arm. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, Derek continues cutting down enemies without pause, blending swordsmanship and fire with seamless efficiency. Watching all of this, Lady Alente is left utterly stunned, her composure crumbling under the terrifying reality around her. Sweat runs down her face as panic floods her thoughts, and she realizes that the danger is real and that she could genuinely die there. The intensity of the moment becomes almost impossible to bear, leaving her unable to decide her next move. Then Derek turns back and urgently warns her that a goblin is charging straight at her, telling her to stay alert. At that same instant, the goblin rushes directly toward Lady Alente with lethal intent. Fear completely overwhelms her, and she becomes certain that she is about to die. Her mind goes blank, and her body locks in place as the monster closes in. From behind her, Derek's voice rings out firmly, telling her that she has to defeat it herself. At those words, something inside her begins to change. As the goblin comes closer, fragments of her past rise in her mind, forcing her to face the image she always had of herself. Deep down, she admits that she has always known how naive and pathetic she used to be. Even as the goblin lifts its weapon to strike, more memories surface, reminding her that she had so often been someone who talked endlessly but never acted. She recognizes the version of herself that envied others and spoke behind their backs, admitting that it truly was who she had been. Yet in the middle of fear and chaos, her perspective finally begins to shift, and a new determination takes shape. Rather than giving in to terror, she realizes that this very moment is the reason she came here, to confront her weakness and put an end to the person she used to be. At that critical instant, Lady Alente finally activates her power. Summoning her courage, she manifests a massive ice arrow, its frigid energy forming vividly before her. At the same time, the goblin lunges with killing intent, aiming to strike her down without hesitation. From a distance, Derek watches closely, observing her every movement without intervening. In the next moment, the enormous ice arrow surges forward with tremendous force, piercing straight through the goblin and tearing past it completely. The creature falls in a single, decisive blow. It is Lady Alente who accomplished this, and the moment marks an important turning point. The rest of the group, seeing it happen, cannot help but feel quiet admiration. Until then, she had contributed nothing and seemed almost like a helpless burden who could not fulfill her role, but this time, she defeats a goblin entirely by herself. After the attack, Lady Alente remains standing where she is, her body trembling slightly from fear and adrenaline. Slowly, she raises her eyes toward her teacher, who has been watching from afar. With calm steadiness, he says that this is only the beginning. Hearing that, Lady Alente answers with a faint smile, her eyes carrying new determination as she realizes that she has finally taken her first true step forward. Under the shadow of Eberstein's stone walls, Derek sat alone and reread a letter. In it, his old master, Kataya Flameheart, said that more than 2 years had already passed since she left Eberstein, and she apologized for contacting him so late. She wrote that she was currently teaching the young lady of House Elvester magic and had been kept busy because the girl was so eager to learn. Looking back, she said that the days she spent wandering Eberstein and teaching Derek magic had been harsh, but far freer and more enjoyable. Of all the mages she had seen in her life, she said that Derek was the most talented of them all. She asked what stage of cultivation he had reached by now, and told him that when the day came for them to meet again, he had to show her his magic. She signed the letter as his old master, Kataya Flameheart. For 2 weeks, Derek kept coming back and reading that letter whenever he had the chance. Lady Alente beside him pointed that out and finally asked what it was. Derek said that it was a letter from his master. She remarked that his master must be an incredible teacher to have the patience and character to teach someone like him. Derek answered that she truly was a great master. When he gave her no reaction, she admitted that she had only been trying to get a rise out of him. Derek calmly asked which part had been meant as the jab, leaving her with nothing to say. She dropped it. He reminded her that the duel was in 2 days, and asked how she was feeling. She admitted that she did not really know. She gathered herself, smiled with firm resolve, and said that she was going to win. At the noble district magic dueling grounds, the crowd gathered in anticipation. In the middle of the crowd, Aislinn was talking to her friend when she spotted Derek passing by in the corner of her eyes. Aislinn excused herself from her companions and called out to Derek. She said that it had been a while, and that she had heard he was now looking after Lady Alente's magic training. Derek replied that their paths had simply happened to cross. After a brief silence, she said that he had not changed at all and asked whether he was being too hard on Lady Alente. She added that Yahello had told her he was not exactly a typical teacher and that Lady Alente had looked quite exhausted lately. Derek answered that for her to worry about her opponent showed a great deal of confidence. Startled, she asked what he meant. Derek then warned her that no matter who the opponent was, she must not let her guard down. All around them, nobles whispered about the coming match. Some said that Lady Aislinn would obviously win unless Lady Alente somehow managed to use 2-star magic. Others pitied Lady Alente and said that her face looked noticeably gaunt. Soon the atmosphere shifted as Lady Aislinn appeared, elegant enough to draw admiration from every direction, and the watching ladies openly marveled at how beautiful she looked. Elsewhere, with footsteps ringing across the grounds, Lady Alente moved forward with her heart fixed on only one thought, repeating to herself again and again that she would win. Lady Alente fixed her gaze ahead and declared to herself that she was definitely going to win. With Derek watching from behind, she stepped forward to face Lady Aislinn. Aislinn greeted her gently and said that she hoped Lady Alente had been well. Alente answered with equal courtesy, saying that she assumed Lady Aislinn had also been well, then added that Aislinn's constant composure had always inspired her. Aislinn quietly denied that and admitted that she had never been this nervous for a duel before. Alente smiled and asked if they should begin. At once, both women summoned mana. Blue power swirled around Aislinn's hand and body, while blazing orange flames gathered around Alente. Their magic spread across the dueling ground in opposite colors, pressing against one another as the air trembled between them. Alente moved first. She unleashed a brilliant, overwhelming display of magic, sending fiery projectiles high into the air until the entire sky above the arena was filled with burning arrows ready to fall. As the blazing rain descended, Alente remembered Derek's harsh lesson in the dungeon. He had told her that if the duel became a pure contest of magical skill, she would not win. When she asked how she was supposed to win then, he answered that it would be through willpower. He explained that all the training they had done was meant to teach her how to squeeze out every last drop of mana. When she sarcastically asked if that had only been his strange hobby, Derek flatly said that he did not have hobbies like that. He then explained that once both sides had completely exhausted their mana, victory would be decided by mental fortitude rather than technique. He had also told her to make her magic as flashy and grand as possible, and to drag the duel into a war of attrition no matter what. He said that once all mana was nearly spent, the winner would be the one who could force out even a single drop more. When Alente asked what would happen if Aislinn's mana capacity was far greater than hers, Derek answered bluntly that then she would lose. He added that mana capacity was mostly something a person was born with, but reminded her that the blood of House Belmyard flowed through her veins. In the end, he told her simply to believe in herself. The watching nobles and Aislinn stared in shock, and she inwardly wondered if Lady Alente had always been this strong. Alente stood beneath the storm of her own flames and raised her arm again, driving the blazing barrage down across the field. Even so, Aislinn did not break. Wrapped in blue mana, she spread her power outward and formed a vast defensive current around herself, standing firm beneath the fiery rain. With her eyes sharpened by resolve, she declared inwardly that she would be the one to win.